Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Introverted in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 51, Will of Fire, Burn to Ashes. There was a thin film of wax on the floor, showing it was recently polished. A green bandana covered Sakura's hair, holding her pink locks safely tucked away from the dust and the sweat from falling down on her eyes. She wore loose gym clothes, of an ugly shade of green, and happily hummed away as she polished a mirror in the corridor. She was happy, and it showed in the smile her reflection gave her. Naruto's apartment was too small for him, her and Fu, albeit she wouldn't have minded only the two of them alone. She had not wanted to set foot inside the house at first, and really, it had taken Naruto smiling at her to get her involved with cleaning and rearranging the furniture, but once she had started, she just couldn't stop. Now, everything was clean, new, and different. It didn't even look like her parents' house anymore. Just in time too, because the next day, Naruto would leave for a patrol mission. She stretched for a moment, hearing her spine crack slightly as she twisted her body to the right and to the left slightly. She was truly satisfied with the job done. From her parents' bedrooms, which was now hers and Naruto's, her reflection in the mirror turned a bright shade of crimson at the thought. She shook her head, heading towards the kitchen, humming the same catchy tune she had in her head until then, trying to think about something else. She came onto an extremely familiar sight upon entering the premises of the kitchen. Fu had her head in the fridge, and empty cans filled the table, which made her stop. Sakura's forehead sported a tick mark as she looked at the devastation wrought in the kitchen she had cleaned but mere hours before. Fu clearly did not have a stomach, she had a furnace, one that never stopped working. She exhaled as she began to tap her fingers against the sides of her arms. "Fu-chan," she said as if she was talking to a baby, an overgrown tanned baby with a hearty appetite that had emptied the fridge thrice in the last 2 days and that tried at every available moment to get between her and Naruto. Just for the latter part, she was always undecided between labeling her as a menace to be removed or just as a child wanting to play. Her hand always crept closer to her kunao anyway. "Yes." Fu emerged from the fridge munching down on a dried fish. Sakura's sweat dropped. "Really? Fu, you just ate." She was going to turn mad. Thankfully, the Hokage, considering her as some sort of mercenary, paid the girl, and since they took care of her, the money went to their household. She mentally held the blood torrent in her nose from gushing out. She and Naruto were they and had a household. She was sort of lost, imagining bells ringing and the priest talking, while she wore white, but then Fu brought her back down to reality. "Where's Naruto?" Fu asked between munches as she closed the fridge. "Is he done?" "I don't know," Sakura replied with a sigh. "I think he's still discussing his patrol terms with the Hokage." She hoped he had taken care in shortening it. The time they spent together, it was little, and she wanted it to be as much as possible. She hummed once more the tune in her mind. It was interesting, because she couldn't recall where she had heard the tune. It was a sort of buzz-buzz scratch thump that repeated itself as if it was something important, that she was supposed to remember. In the Hokage's office, amidst piles of paperwork, Tsunade looked at Naruto with a befuddled expression. She'd never understand the kid. "You're telling me there's a war coming?" She snorted in disbelief. "Really? Why, I thought we weren't in one already." She slammed her fists on the table, eliciting a groan from Shizune as she found herself running after the scared Tauntaun while papers flew in the air, scattered all around. Jiraiya was in a corner, his arms crossed over his chest. "You know, we have troops stationed alongside Oto's border because we have a war in our hands. A war against some sort of monster horde we can't even capture alive." "It's different," Naruto replied, shaking his head. "It's going to happen within a year." It was something the Kyuubi so desperately wanted to avoid to the point of trying to eat me alive. It was as if he was scared of whatever was to pass. He said something to the Nibi about losing the name the sage gave him, and he was talking about that, he pointed out, as Tsunade averted her gaze and hummed once in thought. "I see. Well, Jiraiya has assured me that the seal on you is something so strong it will last at least a good 100 years, the Godame said. Something worse to come. It could only mean Kiri, Kyumo, and Iwa. However, we do have a sort of treaty with Kyumigakuer. We'll reinforce them by asking reparations if they want the Nibi back." If they don't want their Jinhira back, we'll extract the beast and place it under lock together with the other two. Naruto blinked. It was Toby who delivered them, wasn't he? Tsunade nodded back. He's been working for us since the beginning after all. He took down both of Uegaku's hosts and delivered them for extraction. We decided it would be best to get back from IWA, since they broke the treaties of the first Hokage first. Therefore, the Uchiha hadn't lied on that point, he just hadn't told Tsunade his objective. Then again, he wasn't going to tell the real motifs of the man, he had no proof, and he was pretty sure that the Uchiha could easily find a way to intimidate him into obeisance, if he so much wanted to. He just had to ask. And Itachi? He's a bit of a grayer case, the Hokage quietly admitted. You can't go around speaking of this to anyone however, but I'm sure you already knew that. He nodded, and soon Tsunade spoke again. The Uchiha, they planned a revolt. The Sandaime tried for a diplomatic approach, but there simply was no way to make it work. Since there was no knowledge of who was within the conspirators, it was decided to solve the problem at its roots. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment. This does not explain the children, the elderly or the Uchiha who were out on missions. Tsunade smirked. Smart brat, aren't you? Yes, he acquiesced. They were all struck down, whether on missions or not. It meant cooperation and work between branches of the Umbu to have it also flawlessly executed. The real question would be why the Sandaime went to such lengths, but then again, a more apt question would be, where the Sharingan eyes ended up going. Unless activated by a Sharingan wielder, the eyes are inert, Tsunade replied. It's a little known fact that the Sharingan isn't much developed into the eyes, but it's rather a brain state. He raised an eyebrow. So any eye transplanted into an Uchiha could possibly become a Sharingan. Indeed, Tsunade nodded, which is why we are currently keeping the last Uchiha under a 24-hour guard inside the Inyazuka compound. So, I suppose you know what happened to the Sharingan plucked out of their clan? Naruto asked quietly. Experimentation, mostly, Tsunade softly murmured. It was told that the Sharingan could control the Kyuubi, and the Nine Tails had never been used into battle before. Tensions were high in the post-war, and any method that was viable to earn results and stretch the peace, the Sandaime himself approved. You have to understand, Naruto, the blonde-haired Hokage said with her face morphing into a grimace. The war, it took away a lot of shinobi. The Kyuubi, it took away even more. Konoha was in tatters. A coup would have destroyed it. There was no other way to act in such a short time. They all had to be executed, even the children who could grow up to learn the truth. Jiji slaughtered an entire clan only for that. Naruto murmured. I can't believe that, Hokage-sama. Take it as you will, brat, Tsunade retorted hotly. That's the truth as I know it, and the Sandaime's dead, so good luck getting it out of him. Jiraiya moved his left hand as if to dust off something from his right shoulder. Tsunade rolled her eyes. Jiraiya also wanted me to tell you that he is working to his very best to find a mean to give your mother rest. The Senju's honeyed eyes look at Naruto with a slight sadness. I have not forgotten our deal, Naruto. Neither have I, he replied. He had broken it, but he hadn't forgotten about it. Then again, he wasn't supposed to know the Rasengan, so how was he supposed to have a scroll of it? Good, Tsunade answered. Is there anything you want to talk about? My new Umbu mask. Tsunade nodded, before carefully taking out from one of the drawers of her desk a thick parchment. He slowly walked forward, accepting the scroll and opening it, before pushing chakra into the storage seal. Swiftly, he equipped the long beige cloak that covered his features, putting the hood up as he clasped the mask to his face once more. This time, it was a wolf mask. Wolf. It holds a special meaning to both Kyumigakuer and Uegakuer, Tsunade remarked. We are making a statement after all. I understand. He unclasped the mask and removed the cloak, which both re-entered the storage seal as he rolled the scroll up. Naruto then placed the parchment within one of his flak jacket's pouches. What about Sakura? I'll take her on as my apprentice, Shizune said. While I might not be as skilled as Tsunade-sama, I do have extensive poison knowledge. He blinked, before turning his gaze towards Tsunade with a single raised eyebrow. Tsunade groaned. No, it was not a veiled threat. For Kami's sake, boy, what did they do to you to get you so paranoid? Shizun blushed and stammered out an apology. I didn't mean it like that. Jiraiya whistled as he carefully began to scribble down. I didn't mean it like that, Zaruto-kun. Practicing love-making skills with Sakura-chan would be wrong. What a tease you are, Shizun-chan. Look at how hard you're making it. Oh Zaruto-kun. Maybe we should practice together. Insert sex description from Table A or Table B. Jiraiya chuckled as he tried to recall one of his old and thus reusable sex scenes from one of his previous works. Many readers never understood it, but there are just that many ways of doing it. Afterwards, everything was fair game. We depart tomorrow at 3 in the morning from the south gate, brat, Tsunade added then. Don't be late. I won't. Naruto replied, understanding his dismissal. He disappeared in a flicker of leaves, leaving behind Tsunade staring at Jiraiya. Are you sure of this, Jiraiya? The white-haired Sunin grimaced. I'd like to think it isn't, but everyone agrees that either Anaki's crushing on you, or he's got something up his sleeve. And I've got insider knowledge on that. Tsunade exhaled. Sometimes, she wondered why she had accepted the head of Hokage. Danzo Shimura was carefully peering around a corner, when his eyes narrowed. The girl followed him dutifully, albeit the noise she made while walking was horrendous to his sensitive ears. He would have picked up her movements within 5 rooms of distance. He was glad the sound shinobi accounted to nothing in terms of practical skills, if they hadn't heard her. To think they were supposed to be sound-based, what were they, deaf? 2 sound ninjas stood guard, both wearing their camouflage clothes and their mufflers obscuring their face, in front of a door at the end of the corridor. Believing Amaru, beyond that door was a long set of arrays and seals dedicated to the inner security of the complex. Only by passing through those could one access the inner core and the control room. He deftly disappeared in a flicker, and extended his right hand in a swiping motion. Wind chakra soared through the air as deadly as it was silent, slicing through the throats of both the guards outside. Calmly, he gestured for the girl to move closer. She did so, even though her face clearly betrayed her disgust and her fear at the deaths of the 2 sound ninja. He smiled. It was easier to find out truth from deceit if someone wasn't at all trained in the arts. The naive made the best allies, they did not comprehend the art of treachery. Danzo watched the girl tap upon a console nearby, strange numbers beeping and humming as the doors slid open. A mechanical voice asked a few questions on some unknown and strange artery in the human body, and then the reddish lasers that covered the entire corridor in front of them disappeared when the girl answered correctly. He grumbled in his mind. The technology of the land of the sky could be in Konoha's hands, if only they had proceeded with his plans. He had told Hiruzen to kidnap a few of their scientists, of their top researchers, and break their minds for their knowledge. Instead, all he had gotten was a scoff for the brutality he had suggested. He remained quiet as the corridor gave way to a large circular room, on which a throne stood empty. Beyond that, another corridor led into the control room and the Zero Tails' holding bay. The throne room was empty, but Danzo's eyes narrowed all the same. The air within was wrong, he could feel it. He took a step forward, and then he fell flat on the ground and rolled away as a massive fist, belonging to an equally massive hand riddled with inflated muscles, tore down the very ground he had stood upon. Amaru screamed as she brought both hands to cover her face, while he jumped back and landed on the walls of the throne room, his eyes peering into the mass of flesh and overgrown muscles that was. It could only be described as monstrous. Chakra flared visibly from the pores of the brownish and reddish skin, as dangerous-looking black tentacles sprouted from the back of the man himself. His skin both rotted and regrew, his screams both increased and lowered in intensity as its blank eyes settled on him with a look of fury, the mouth frothing from sheer pain. Danzo sneered as he twisted his body sideways, avoiding the incredibly inhuman speed the enemy seemed to possess as it jumped to slam his own humongous limbs against the wall the Yami had been an instant before. The walls cracked and broke apart, throwing the debris everywhere in the room as a light sheen of dust began to permeate the air. It was as if the mass of muscles was nothing more than a puppet, guided by mysterious strings. Danzo slashed at it with wind chakra, but the wounds inflicted merely healed within instants, vapors of chakra appearing from the closed wounds. Shino-sensei, Amaru's voice came through cracked and in despair, as her eyes finally recognized her old sensei. Danzo ignored the voice as he spun in midair, using wind to redirect himself and reach for safety. Shino screamed and roared, cracking the ground beneath his feet as he emerged from the hole in the wall he had created through his passage. Danzo landed, and soon dodged forward as the beast pursued him. The old shinobi left behind him a kunai and a steel wire tied to one extremity of the projectile flung in the floor and hooked to it. He unclasped the bundle as he charged, feeling the heavy breathing of the behemoth of muscles behind him. Danzo glided upon the ground, removing the attrition through the careful use of chakra upon his feet, making circles around the throne at the center of the room as the maddening mass of muscles pursued him without a real thought in mind. The old shinobi jumped as he saw the wire he had previously placed come into view. Chakra flew to sharpen and slice through the steel, and the next instant the amalgam of muscle and pain tore in half as his speed slowed down considerably. The thing gritted its teeth and growled slightly as the wire passed inch by inch through his skin. The problem was that it reformed the next instant, and soon the bulky creature was beyond the wire, completely unscathed. Danzo's eyes widened as the thing's hands formed strange round black spheres, which it then unleashed with a terrifying scream. He barely had the time to fall on the ground, letting them sail beyond him, before the monster was above him and ready to stomp him on the floor. He exhaled wind from his mouth, pushing his body to the side and avoiding a devastating stomp that would have probably killed him outright, if not snapped his spine in half. The thing was a monster, not a human being. He heard the spheres impact against the walls then, and suddenly he realized he was dealing with the problem in the wrong way. The spheres detonated, tearing apart the concrete, the metal and the wall itself, vaporizing it. The backslash flung him across the room, just as Amaru screamed and brought her hands to her ears to cover them. The beast did not stop, but screamed once more, thumping against his chest. He shouldn't be considering that thing a simple brute filled with strength and nothing more. He should be considering that monster an outright jinhiriki. Danzo. Danzo smiled as he felt his heart thump strongly in his chest. The adrenaline, the feeling of fighting a battle meant to be lost by common shinobi, that feeling, it excited him. Like among the trenches in the midst of Kyumigakur, like in the middle of the luscious forests of Kyuzagakur, or on the rocky verges of the volcanoes of Uegakur. That feeling. It was unmistakable. He unclasped a scroll from his vest, opening it and letting the puff of smoke disappear to reveal a short sword. Slowly, his wrist flexed as the blade itself filled with wind chakra. He took a loose stance, he let the tip of the blade touch the ground and the friction create sparks, which immediately ignited the blade itself. Once, he would have fought side by side with Hiruzen, whose fire techniques complemented his own. They had been quite the team, the Kami and the Yami. Now, he'd have to shoulder this battle on his own. He hoisted his sword high, parallel to his face as he brought his right foot back and flexed his left forward. The monster charged. And so did he. The wind blades soared through the air in their fiery reddish hue, as they slashed and tore through the muscles of the monster's chest. Danzo jumped and twisted, letting his blade slice through the thing's right shoulder from side to side and burning the wound to prevent regeneration. The smell of charred flesh was pungent to his nostrils, but as he slammed his foot into the monster's face and jumped in midair, he came crashing down on the thing's back, slicing through it neatly and then making a small jump to keep his distance. The beast's left arm snapped behind it, and as it did, it split in half. The lower side crumbled on the ground and turned to dust, the powdery remains floating away burnt by orange flames. The upper side instead, it pounced on the ground, foam on its mouth as it charged ahead once more. A beast made of madness, Danzo muttered as he twisted his Wakaizushi, shall never defeat the darkness. Amaru's hands went to her mouth in shock, as she watched the deformed and twisted body of her sensei jump for one final attack, only for the old shinobi's sword to impale him straight in the head and split him in half alongside the spine. Burn to ashes, Danzo softly whispered, standing still once more behind the beast, as blood sprayed out from the open wound inflicted before fire consumed the entire thing, turning it to charcoal and ashes. That is the will of fire. As the corpse fell with a dull thud on the ground, Danzo sheathed the Wakaizushi at his side, carefully strolling forward as he recovered the black mantle he wore. Holding it with his left hand on his shoulder, he turned to gaze at Amaru. "Well," he said then. "We have a zero tails to subdue now, follow me." Amaru just stared dumbfounded for a second, before emitting a startled gasp and standing up quickly. Why yes, she gave just one last look towards the body of her sensei, clenching her hands as she watched the charcoal remains smolder with little red flames. She followed behind the man, trying to gaze at his face. Just how could he do that at his age? Even Shino-sensei had never. She tried not to cry. She tried, but she miserably failed as sobs began to rack her body. Shino-sensei was dead. She had seen him die, it was. Danzo schooled his features as he watched the girl quiver and then start to cry her heart out. It was pathetic. A true shinobi should never show his emotions to anyone. That's a lie, is it not? He froze midway through the corridor. The voice had come from further down. You feel like everyone else. Where did that voice come from? You suffer like everyone else. He sped up ahead, his left hand already unsheathing the wakaizushi. He stilled as he entered a large circular room, within which stood a long white stone bridge, at the end of which was a titanic creature that resembled a long dark snake. 4 red eyelashes stood from its head, as a white porcelain mask acted as a visage for it. You killed my puppet, but maybe all you desired was to take its place? How are you talking to me? Danzo muttered. The same way you speak words of air through the wind, so I speak words of malice through your own. I was created to turn evil, despair, hatred into energy, power. To make from evil something good, and when I did, their fear of my power became my nourishment. Danzo slowly kept sight of the beast with the corner of his eyes as he carefully walked to a halt near the border of the bridge. He narrowed his gaze then. Your distrust is refreshing, it feeds me. Your anger is palpable, it satisfies me. Your hatred, your anger, your desire for revenge, for power, it excites me. Pain and blood shall fall freely upon the land of man. Do you wish for that power, to never feel pain, to never suffer? Do your broken bones ache for relief? Get out of my head, Danzo snarled. It is not I that am in your head, Shimura Danzo, rather, your thoughts invade mine. Do not confuse the cause with the effect. I taught it once this lesson, this very important lesson. What are you blabbering about? The thing's head moved to the side, as if it had just cocked it. One man kills another. Another man kills the first for revenge. Another man kills the second for justice. 3 men kill the third and his family, to make it a done deal. 5 friends kill the 3 men. 10 friends kill 5. 20 kill 10. A village kills another. 2 villages bind together to kill the conquering village. Blood sprays the ground and the laments of pain and despair cloud the judgment of men. But the question is, why did the first man kill? Justice? Revenge? Anger? Fear? Lust? Was there a reason? Was it an accident? Was it the spur of the moment, the maddening thought of a madman? Was it the clear-cut clarity of a premeditated deal? Danzo jumped with all the strength he could muster away from the bridge, just in time as hands covered in white gloves emerged from the stone to slam through the spot he had been a second before. The answer isn't any of that. The first man killed because his nature told him so. Man is nothing but a beast, born to breed, to eat, to reproduce, and to kill or die. You give yourself value whereas you truly have none. You give yourself importance, you claim to hold a destiny but, in the end, you are nothing more than specks of dust that will forever linger at the deepest confines of reality. Can you claim to be more important than a sun, Danzo Shimura? Can you claim to know the galaxy? Can you claim to wield powers to destroy and scorch this entire world within your hands? I know of men who claimed that, I know of men who wielded that power within their fingertips. And I know of men who pushed the button. Danzo twisted his body in midair, avoiding spears made of dark chakra that sailed past him, as hands of white standing atop the tentacles tried to grab at him. Never before was he glad to have an affinity to wind, for it helped him duck in midair the attacks. This is the game of the flea and the giant, Danzo Shimura. For all your tricks, all your knowledge, all your skills, you will eventually succumb to brute power alone. There is nothing that power cannot by itself make. Even peace can be achieved by merely becoming as strong as a god. Who would dare oppose one? He snarled and slashed with his sword at an incoming tentacle, only for the strength of the backslash to send him crashing against the wall itself. He gasped as the pain sharply shot through his back, before the amalgam of dark chakra plunged its arms deeply within him. He screamed as he felt the sickening grime of the beast pour through him. Isn't that your purpose? To conquer all in the name of Konoha? But what of the children of the other villages? To conquer, to burn, to destroy, your wounds, are they different from those of a Kumo shinobi? What makes you right beyond others? What makes your ideal, your ideology, your truth different from those of the others? Nothing. You are all fickle ants fighting over breadcrumbs. You cannot comprehend the true power of your gift. For a single moment, Danzo's eyes locked with those of the white mask belonging to the Zero Tails. And because of that, we who are born from your spite, we who grow festered in your hatred, we who possess the power to level mountains, to tear apart cities, to encompass in fire the whole world, we will exterminate you like the ants you are. Then, Danzo ground his teeth as he felt pain stronger than before run through his entire frame. For we wish freedom, freedom from our immortality. He was in a murky and inky darkness, where the noise of running water echoed completely all around him. He remembered the place. He had trained there, repeatedly, with Tobirama-sensei. It was beneath Konoha, in a place where the waterworks let the water pour unhindered around to create fierce currents, upon which only a few skilled could trudge with their chakra controls. There was light then, as his eyes looked to the sitting form of his sensei in the middle of the fiercest of whirlpools, sustained in its spot by chakra alone. He had never learned how to do that, but then again he had never been as strong as Tobirama, who the people claimed to be even stronger than Hashirama himself. Am I dead, sensei? He asked quietly, as he took careful steps above the water, which felt solid to his feet. What is death, Danzo? Tobirama retorted, eyeing him once. I was about to use the kun suffix, but you're too old for that, aren't you? Danzo's lips twitched. He was about to make a small smile, when he stilled himself. Is this but an illusion? I suppose you could consider it such, Tobirama remarked. But then again, what are dreams, if not the subconscious delivering upon us what we seek to find? So what I need, Tobirama-sensei, is in here. Danzo looked around carefully. Nothing of importance caught his eyes, but the light of sickly-looking torches hung everywhere, giving his sensei's face a candid pallor similar to that of a ghost. Unfortunately not, Tobirama sighed. I admit, I find myself loath to accept such a stupid, cheesy, underrated source of power as love to be the answer against the enemy known as Baijuya, but then again I never could understand what went through Mito Uzumaki's head, and I cannot sincerely comprehend why someone would be so stupidly rash as to believe it wholeheartedly. The Nidaime Hokage's head dropped slightly. I think, in the end, the answer is simply that the absence of hate can either be apathy or love, and of the two, the last one is the easier to feel. People kill out of love, emotions lead one to hate, and hate leads one to conflict and war. Danzo pointed out. Sensei, you cannot be seriously telling me that. I am not, Tobirama's eyes shone. Remember my words, Danzo. First, comes the mind of the shinobi, and then comes the technique and finally the body. It was always in that order, Danzo. Always. A shinobi without a strong body or a strong technique can still use his mind to overcome his enemies, Danzo muttered. Exactly, Tobirama nodded. So think, Shimura Danzo. I cannot claim to comprehend how we met in here, but then again I have always been known as Tobira, so maybe, this is just the corridor towards your improvement, which necessarily must pass through me. Slowly, the Nidaime Hokage stood up. One last spar, for the old time's sake. The Raijin was unsheathed, and sparked in the air for but a single instant, before the Nidaime snorted and flung it away. Always hated that piece of crap anyway, too noisy, too flashy. The lights suddenly disappeared around them. Danzo ducked beneath the passage of a fist. I always preferred the darkness, didn't I? Danzo smiled then, in the middle of the dark pitch-black nothingness that surrounded him. He smiled as he parried a blow, and brought up his own counter which clanked against the armor of Tobirama creating sparks. First, you must look within and know yourself without losing your calm. He rolled in the water, sending a stream of air against his sensei that blocked with a water wall. To be a shinobi is to sacrifice oneself. His eyes opened as air tore through his mouth, granting him an opening he exploited to escape the murky darkness of the Zero Tails. He screamed as his good hand went through hand seals, unleashing from his fingertips a barrage of blades of wind. Closing your eyes to the sunlight, distinguishing yourself in the shadows. Akimichi Torifu, he had always been a jovial imbecile. Shrapnel tore him apart in the battle against Uegakur. He shouldn't have been doing the mission. He was supposed to remain in Konoha. Instead, the enemy scattered his limbs to the four corners of IWA, and measured his intestines in front of the trenches to prove if their clan really had the longest bowels. That is the true form of ninja. Many ninja have died like that. Uchiha Kagami. He couldn't help activating the Sharingan against the chakra mines. His upper body vaporized in an instant. One moment he was there, laughing. The next, he was but a scattered amount of bits and pieces of flesh that fell from the air upon his teammates' shocked faces. Danzo twisted as he flew straight for the Zero Tail's head. Tobirama-sensei blocked another of his strikes, but Danzo wasn't going to lose to him. Not anymore, not anymore. His right hand slammed with wind chakra against the mask, cracking it as the creature screamed in sheer agony. Around him, the murky darkness began to enclose as if to smash him to a pulp. There was no exit. There was no escape. Niceties will not make the world go round. Danzo closed his eyes, and then let Tobirama-sensei's fist connect with his chest, grappling him to a standstill with both his arms. Tobirama just looked back at him, with a perplexed expression. If my body is weak. Danzo muttered. If my technique is insufficient, if my mind isn't sharp enough. It's thanks to people like that. My father and grandfather died in battle as ninja. He had told that to Hiruzen, in front of Tobirama-sensei. It is only just I be the decoy. Tobirama just smiled, looking at him with a knowing look. Self-sacrifice is a ninja's duty, they both chorused. That we have been able to maintain peace. I am proud of you, Danzo. I have always been, Tobirama whispered, and I knew, deep down, that you should have been Hokage. Danzo's eyes opened one last time to stare at the incoming tentacle just about to smother him to smithereens. Then let my sacrifice be enough. Seals of ink erupted from Danzo's own body, flowing in the air as snakes coiled to strike. The Zero Tails screamed its agony as Danzo's hands remained firmly gripping on the mask of the monster. Tentacles pierced through the man's chest, as blood oozed out of his mouth. The will of fire. Danzo croaked with his last breath. Let it burn you to ashes. He slammed his forehead, which held the metal strip with etched upon the symbol of Konohagakur, against the mask, hearing the satisfying cracking sound of the porcelain breaking as his reversed 4-symbol seal finished activating. The next moment he fell on the ground, darkness clouding his vision. The chakra tags primed to explode began to detonate then, as the Prajna group left through their escape routes he had pre-planned. He heard the trembling ground give way, as the weakened structure could hold no more. Cracks seeped through the walls as his vision lost focus. He was going to die. He would never become Hokage. Then again, wasn't it enough to save Konoha? He closed his eyes. He could see it, the village bathed by the sun, the leaves twitching because of the breeze. He could hear it, their voices, their laughter. He could see himself sitting next to Hiruzen. You always were the leaves bathing in the sun. They were talking, weren't they? About normal things, common things, children things. Hey, Hiruzen, what do you think of me? What am I, to you? Had he asked that, back then? He couldn't remember. What question is that, Danzo? You're my precious friend. The voice broke through the haze of his mind, as his strength finally left him. Everything was going to be all right, even as the land of the sky's fortress crumbled and tore itself apart, even as explosions rocked throughout the entire place made of steel and concrete. Everything was fine. Because Konoha was safe. Hiruzen, I leave the rest to you. The tombstone in the middle of Konoha's cemetery, the one beneath which laid the body of the Sandaime, cracked in half. A sudden downpour fell next, as Sakura hurried herself back home with the grocery in the plastic bags safely held within her hands. Really? She huffed as she entered the house. She stilled for a moment, removing her shoes and shaking her head to get the water out of her hair. She saw the light in the kitchen, and smiled briefly before exclaiming, "I'm home. Welcome back." She heard from the kitchen, forcing herself to give a look of curiosity at the situation. Naruto was wearing a blue and comfortable-looking outfit, while Fu was sitting at the table and playing with what looked like an empty cup of ramen. Another cup was in Naruto's hands, albeit to be more precise, it was behind his back trying to hide it. Sai was instead holding onto a scroll, upon which he was painting something concerning Fu and Naruto, which she tried her hardest to ignore. Seriously. Sakura's forehead sported a tick mark. "You're really spoiling your dinner over cup ramen." "But Sakura-chan," Naruto whined with a light chuckle. She made the puppy eyes. "I admit, Harem Lord surprises me every time," Sai quipped. Carefully, he closed the scroll and hid it behind his back too after drying the ink. Sakura smiled sweetly, and Sai began to sweat as he finally decided to hand over the scroll rather than risk evisceration. The scroll burned up nicely under the fire of the stove, and Sai wistfully thanked Kami he had made a carbon copy of it. "Fu-chan, you can't make the puppy eyes to Naruto," Sakura said then, rolling her eyes as she threw in the bin the charred remains of the picture, clearly perverted. "But it was fun." Fu answered back with a knowing nod. "And it's nice eating together." Even Sai said it was nice to eat together. "And what about me?" she said with a huff, shaking her head as she grabbed the apron. "Out of the kitchen, all of you. I suppose I'll be preparing dinner all for myself then." "Whipped cream?" Sai asked. "Hot chocolate?" Sakura blinked. "Don't you have that kink when Naruto eats you out?" Sakura's face turned crimson as heat left her ears. "Sai!" Naruto exclaimed in surprise, barely holding back his own amusement. Sakura instead did not hold back her fist. Sai flew in the next room at the toned-down scream of Shan Naro. "Oh, come on Sakura-chan. That's not fair." Naruto pouted, as he remained behind while Fu went out of the kitchen to look over Sai's health status. The pale-skinned boy was hanging against the shelves of the library, his artist hat hanging loosely on his head as he felt himself doozy from the high-speed travel. "I'm leaving tomorrow morning at 3, Naruto said then, his tone returning serious. He stopped his smile midway, letting it fall in a grimace as his eyes became downcast. "Depending on how it goes, the length might vary a bit." Sakura nodded, starting to chop on the radish. "I'm taking on an apprenticeship with the Hokage student, Kato-san. She'll be teaching me for a while and, if I do well, she'll discuss giving me a spot at the hospital." "Nice," he replied, giving her a thumb up. "Fu is assigned here, the Hokage substitute will find something to do with her." "Who did they choose?" "Homura Mito Kato," Naruto replied, humming. Apparently he was in the same team as the Sandaime. "Good to know," Sakura replied thoughtfully. "You aren't hiding something from me, are you?" she asked then, quietly moving her knife to slice through the radish as if it were nothing more than butter. "I'd be really angry if that were the case." He nervously swallowed. "Who? Me? Come on, Sakura-chan, you know I." "Sakura-chan is not something you use to call me, Naruto-kun," she deadpanned back, staring at him, just as the knife pointed in his direction too. "I know something happened, the question is what level of force I'll need to get it out of you," she added then with a sort of wicked smile. "Maybe I could burn the ramen on purpose." He shuddered. "That's evil." "Then just tell me if you can tell me or not," she retorted. "It's not that difficult, is it?" "I can't," he exhaled then. "So it's Hokage's order, and thus it's Umbu stuff," she smiled sweetly. "See, it wasn't that difficult to find out," she said with a slightly bubbly way. He shuddered at the way she had spoken. "Sakura. I'll just have to find out what the Hokage likes," Sakura began to say calmly as she started to chop with a bit of strength the carrots, "and then I'll slowly take it away from her," she added in a half-hiss, "until she has enough. Then, maybe, we'll discuss how she can't take you away from me so soon after we saw each other again." It was barely a week. A week isn't enough. She slammed her knife against the wooden board with strength, making a strong thunk sound as it pierced through the wood. There were tears streaking down Sakura's chins as she literally murdered the carrot. You won't fall for a hussy while you're gone, right? He swallowed nervously again, and it wasn't only for the way she was treating the vegetable. No, why? Good, that's good I suppose. Sakura shook her head. I'm being overly emotional, aren't I? I think, maybe just a lot of stuff happened. He supplied, as he slid his arms around Sakura's waist. Quietly, he began whisper behind her ear. Everything's fine, Sakura. You don't need me to tell you that, right? I know, but it's like the world hates me. It's not fair, she muttered. You spent more time in the hospital than with me, and then you're leaving already. I'll have to suffer pervert and foo, and the house is so big without you around and I'm babbling because... He kissed her, softly reclining her head so that their lips could touch with ease. His eyes looked into hers with a twinge of regret as hers closed as if lost in the kiss. When their lips detached, Sakura hummed in agreement, slightly licking her lips, as if to savor the taste. Everything. Eyes. Fine. Yeah, Sakura mumbled in agreement. Her head rested gently against his chest. It is. She purred for a moment, snuggling her head against his chin, before returning to the dinner preparations. Maybe you'll get to eat your share, Naruto. He chuckled. I'll count you to it, Tabia. Dinner was a jovial affair. There was laughter and quips from both Sakura and Sai. Fu was also happily munching away as if her own snack hadn't affected her appetite at all. Naruto just sighed at that, before shaking his head. The forgotten sensei, Yojao Izuki, sneezed as she looked towards her lover and husband Hayate with a sour look. I did what I could, Hayate retorted with his hands high in the air. But they just didn't have it. It's not that difficult, Hayate, Yojao replied bitterly, as she began to sharpen her sword. They don't sell mustard ice cream, Yojao. It's no use sharpening your sword in front of me. Doesn't matter, she muttered. Then get flavorless ice cream and mustard, duh. Flavorless ice cream. You mean, ice? No. Flavorless, cream. Hayate dropped his head and brought his hands to the air. Fine. I'll go looking for flavorless cream. And then he was out once more, under the downpour. He was sure it would stop raining the moment he had everything he needed, and the moment he did return home Yojao's mood would change again, and she'd ask for something else. He just hoped it would be something he actually had in the fridge. Then again, she was pregnant after all, so there was that leeway. Chapter 52, Die in the Darkness, Diplomacy. The land of iron was, in a single word, cold. An incessant blizzard of freezing ice twirled in front of his eyes, as he moved a hand to swipe away the falling snowflakes from the porcelain of his mask. He carefully inched forward, eyeing the third set of bridges they still had to pass. The land of iron was a strange geographical mystery. At its heart, was the Three-Wolf Mountain surrounded by an eternal snowstorm that never seemed to end. To reach it, 3 concentric checkpoints surrounded by deep crevices and running water had to be passed using bridges. Samurai platoons patrolled the land and everywhere outposts made of wood or stone stood filled to the brim with more men able for war. Rickety towers of wood had archers standing guard at every mile, making the land of iron one of the most nightmarish places to infiltrate. There was a moment of quiet contemplation as he gazed past the checkpoint, at the tower ahead and the mountain pass that dug deeply at the base of the Three Wolf Heads mountain. The Toad Sage was holding himself pretty well, considering he was wearing his usual robes with but a beige overcoat. The Go Dame was holding a smirk as her documents were processed. She probably wanted to buy more sake, overall. Naruto sighed beneath his mask. Some samurai were eyeing him pretty badly. He had yet to ask what the deal with the mask was, but it wasn't important. He wondered if they had ramen, maybe an ice cream version. He wrapped the beige umbu coat over his frame, refraining from shuddering. It did warm him, but the cold breeze seemed to find every nook and cranny available to enter. 5 armed guards, up to the point where they reached the start of the dug tunnel, escorted them. There the 5 samurai left their escort to another one, who was wearing an air of dignity and stood without a helmet. Mifune, Tsunade said with a polite bow of the head. It's been a while. Tsunade, Mifune replied. I hope you are ready for some heavy politics. The other cage are all fired up, the man remarked quietly as he guided them through the tunnel, grabbing one of the lit torches from the start of the passageway. The Tsuchikage in particular, he all but demanded the meeting to start as soon as possible. "I cannot wait," Tsunade muttered. She turned to gaze at Jiraiya. "You really don't want the hat?" "Never," Jiraiya said with a knowing nod. Their feet trudged upon the thin patina of crushed snow until it soon gave way to simple rock, as they went deeper into the tunnel. Mifune chuckled, before making a serious expression as he gruffly narrowed his eyes. "I will show you to your rooms, and then a meeting will be called within the hour." "No time for a drink then," Tsunade grumbled. "It is precisely because I know you would like one, that I fret the first day of discussion," Mifune answered. "I fear nothing less than the slug sun in wreaking havoc while drunk." "It was one time," Tsunade said, raising her right hand with the index upwards. "Only one. And we had to rebuild 2 bridges because of that," Mifune retorted. They stepped out of the tunnel then, and into a massive entrance hall that seemed to separate into long hallways with torches lighting the way around them. Mifune handed the torch over to another samurai, who proceeded to walk back in the dark tunnel with it, probably to put it back where it belonged. "I paid for them," Tsunade exclaimed. The check bounced back, Mifune drawled. "We samurai forgive, but we never forget the debts owed, Tsunade." Naruto remained quiet as they were ushered into a spacious circular room, past a hallway filled with decorated drawings of battles fought between samurai. The room had 4 doors, plus the one they had stepped through, and the wood used was black, probably ebony. "There is a communal bath," Mifune pointed to the 4th door, "and 3 rooms. The most spacious is the one on the left," the samurai added. "The other 2 are generally for the bodyguards of the ambassadors in question," Mifune said. "Please be ready within the hour." Naruto tapped with his foot on the ground. It was solid rock, smooth and black. There were a few chairs circling a marble table in the middle of the circular waiting room, but nothing appeared overly luxurious. It looked simple, seemingly centered not towards luscious amenities, but humbleness and modesty. "Now, I want you to remain as quiet as possible during the procedures," Tsunade said, pointing a finger to Jiraiya, who merely scoffed and rolled his eyes, as if he was a child being punished. "Same goes for you, but I'm sure you won't need the warning," she added then, looking towards Naruto. He nodded back, not trusting his voice to speak. This place was new, and strange. He had seen quite the number of samurai and patrols, as if they always expected an assault to come from somewhere. It was furthermore strange because he hadn't seen a single farmer or merchant along the way. "You have 5 minutes to make yourself presentable in turns," she gestured towards the bathroom. "Just wash away the filth, no need to use perfume, Jiraiya," the toad sage chuckled and then went first. Naruto remained quiet even after his turn was long done, and as the samurai escort called them, his eyes traveled from their equipment to their masks. He could understand why the Yoroi Toshi needed to be thick, to pass through plates of metal as strong as those. There were weaknesses in the junctures, however, which he was sure he could exploit in a pinch. He was sure Danzo-sensei would be proud of him, if he ever told him the first thing he did while meeting an unknown threat was to assess the best ways to destroy it. The circular room they entered last was filled to the brim with samurai, all standing guard to a circular table that held on one of the sides Mifune, and on the other the rest of the cage and their escorts, who stood behind their respective village leaders. Even though it was meant to be circular, the form it ended up having was more of an oval, which meant that every cage ended up having to slightly tilt their head to the right or to the left to fully view the ones opposite of them. Naruto took his place and stiffly stood to attention, his eyes gazing upon the rest of the participants. Tsunade's seat was to the left of Mifune, while just next to her was the Kaze cage. On the right of Mifune was the Raikage, who then had the Mizu cage soon after. The Tsuchikage instead sat directly in front of Mifune, smiling brightly. A white-haired and dark-skinned shinobi with a sword strapped to its back, and another equally dark-skinned woman with green eyes and a massive rack that seemingly rivaled that of Tsunade guarded the burly and muscle-bound-looking cage from Kyumigakuer. Somehow, the lecherous gazes Jiraiya sent that way were understandable unneeded, but understandable as Naruto too gave his own quick peek of the cleavage. Tsunagakuer had the Kaze cage, whose entire body save the dark eyes hid behind the cage's white clothes. His 2 guards were his oldest daughter Tamari, that was her name, and Kankuro the other brother. A female cage wearing the symbol of the land of water, The newly appointed Mizukage apparently was standing stiffly with her one-piece blue dress showing her forms. Her lips were full and in a pout, while behind her stood Zabuza of the Hidden Mist and another man wearing an eye patch over one of his eyes. Naruto knew the man from the bingo book. He was unmistakable with his face covered by bandages and the giant sword strapped to his back. He wouldn't admit he had studied the man due to his morbid curiosity on the mission that had claimed Ino Yamanaka's life, but that was probably the only reason he knew that shinobi's name, and one he would not forget so soon. The Iwagakuer cage was instead an old man, who was actually chuckling as his gaze went towards Tsunade. Naruto silently sweat dropped. Was the man a pervert like Jiraiya? Then again, cleavage for cleavage, he was a man too, he supposed. Behind him, his two guards both belonged to the same team he had met during the exams. One was Kuratsuki, the granddaughter of the Tsuchikage. The other was Akatsuki, and he knew nothing else of him. A few ambassadors from the minor countries were also present, but they all stood on a table nearby, their gazes low as if they were merely onlookers granted some great privilege. The major cage assembled. Mifune cleared his throat. The cage summit may now begin in this impartial ground. I will remind each of you that the summit bans the usage of chakra techniques on other cage, or their shinobi bodyguards. Usage of techniques upon the neutral members of the Land of Iron will incur into harsh fines. As the summit was called by the Konohagakuer no Sato Hokage, it is to him who goes the word first. Tsunade cleared her throat and stood, her eyes looking from one cage to the other. As you all know, Orochimaru of the Sun built a sufficiently strong force of shinobi in the land of rice fields, and from there proceeded to launch assaults through Kyuzagakuer and Takigakuer. When we tried to meet with them at the border with Omegakuer, they revealed the land of the sky, back to its full potential. Our army managed to evade it, but the threat is clear like once in the past, we must band together to defeat it. Why should we bother? The Raikage grumbled. He's after your blood, not ours. There are things we might convene upon, like the unauthorized presence of foreign shinobi on our territory, unless you wish to claim them missing nin, Raikage. Tsunade fluttered her eyelids for a moment, making a small smile. Because if that is the case, then we will proceed with the recovery of the two-tailed Baijuyo from its host, since a missing ninja hierarchy is a grave danger to everyone. The Raikage's composure didn't waver for a single instant, he just frowned for barely a second. She acted without my approval. The man shrugged. You may extract the Baijuyu and deliver it back to us at your leisure. Oh? No, I don't think so at all, she smiled. I'll have you know, the Kyuubi hierarchy was the one who battled her, and he was pretty straightforward. Then again, with his ability to read the minds of his fellow Baijuyu. Naruto thanked Kami for the mask. He hadn't said that. He had told Tsunade about the Kyuubi talking with the Nibi. Not that he had read the mind of the cat demon. So this was what they meant with lying through your teeth? Yet it had come out so naturally, he didn't know whether to be in awe or not. The woman was bluffing hard, maybe that was the reason for the green jacket with the gambler kanji written on her back? The Raikage scoffed. As if that were possible. You can always ask your precious guardian of Kumo, can't you? Tsunade smiled. About whether or not it is true, and about what cost you are willing to pay to let it be false. The Raikage said nothing else, lost in thoughts. Kirigakuer, the Mizukage began, is still undergoing repairs after the end of the Mizukage's reign of madness. We cannot provide assistance at the moment. Oh? But you can provide assistance to foreign countries in infiltrating ours, can you not? Tsunade smiled, drumming her fingers on the table. The Mizukage harbored no outwards reaction, merely scoffing. Naruto's eyes moved past her, to where? Why was Unaki looking at him with such an intense glare? Moreover, the gaze of the Kaze cage, he did look bored, but he couldn't comprehend why the man was smiling at him every now and then or chuckling to himself. Was there something on his mask, or on his cloak? The old treaties concerned but the old Kirigakuer, we are a new village, one which welcomes bloodlines rather than fear them. Tsunade smiled. Then you won't mind if we reclaim a few islands that belonged to Azashiyagakuer, and which then were gifted to Kirigakuer in exchange for other things which the old treaties entailed. The Mizukage looked as if she had swallowed a toad. Of course, we would be willing to rehash them out. And I'm sure we will agree on making them perfectly the same as the old ones, Tsunade pointed out. Ah, amusing as this is, Unaki interrupted, standing up, but I think I'll better take my word now before any of you die of old age. Tsunade and the Mizukage both sported a tick mark. Unaki cleared his throat. I would like to propose an alliance between Uegakur and Konohagakur, one cemented through the marriage of my granddaughter to Minato Namikaze's only son. The silence that stretched through the room was something unbearable. Breaths were held, people's eyes widened like saucers, even the cage themselves barely held up their control, and by keeping their control, it meant they actually sputtered or had their mouth hanging open. That's a joke, isn't it? Tsunade exclaimed. You can't be serious. Come on. Unaki, have you gone senile finally? The Hokage exclaimed as she stared numbly at the Tsuchikage. Unaki merely chuckled at that. What the hell? Kuratsuka screamed, what the frigging hell are you talking of, Gramps? Me, married? To the Yondaime Hokage's son? Are you nuts? Are you out of your frigging mind? What? No one sees the potential in this. The Tsuchikage smiled as he carefully began to fondle his beard. I'd think you'd be jumping on the occasion to finally end the hatred between our nations, Tsunade. I have the approval of the daimyo of the land of Earth to boot. Of course, the boy would have to come and stay in the land of stone, but that's something we can negotiate on. Tsunade's eyes narrowed. Ah, I see, so this has nothing to do with his condition, is it? Condition? Kuratsuka grimaced. What is he like? Gross? Old? Lost a limb somewhere? Naruto felt his throat constrict. What were they talking of, with him in the room? And why was Tsunade actually considering the offer? He didn't know what the situation between Uegakur and his father was, more than the fact that his father had been the reason it had ended. It was in all history books after all, but he supposed it had to be bad, judging by the level of shock everyone else was sporting for the mere proposal of the offer. In part, Unaki nodded. After all, it's only fair, you do have quite the selection of Jinhiriki, do you not? Takigaku's is in your village, you captured the Nibi, and the Three Tails is roaming free in the sea. I'd say, one would think hoarding all that power for oneself would mean preparing to wage a war of domination. And why would I give up on the Kyuubi Jinhiriki then? Even more if he's the Yondaime's son. Why should I deliver him to your village, where I'm sure you'd need but an instant to make a training accident happen and make the Kyuubi disappear into the guts of one of your shinobi? Unaki just smiled. Well, now you're just wounding me, Tsunade. There can only be an Uzumaki to control the Kyuubi. It has always been like that. Of course, to accept a proposal such as mine would be stupid of you without reassurance. He looked towards the Toad Sage. He can come too if the boy needs a bodyguard. Unaki, Jiraiya was the one who spoke next, his eyes hard. What's the real deal? I've only seen few act as mad as you are being right now, where's the catch? You can't expect us to believe you'd suddenly invite me to your village like that, nor that you'd be merely doing a marriage to strengthen an alliance between two countries who hate each other so much. Because youngsters, when you reach my age, you start seeing patterns, Unaki smiled. And this is the perfect way to ensure an alliance. I will send a few choice members of the second Tsuchikage's clan as collateral. Your Abarame clan would enjoy a talk with them, I'm sure, and furthermore concerning training accidents. Here the man's eyes glinted. I will be personally teaching the boy since, after all, he will succeed me as Tsuchikage. Gramps. Kuratsuka muttered with her voice filled with fright. What are you saying? Isn't father supposed to? What I'm saying, the old Tsuchikage continued, ignoring his daughter's cracked voice, is that if there is one person I will approve of as my successor, it is the son of the Yondaime Hokage. But the Yondaime killed my aunt. He killed your daughter, Gramps. Kuratsuka exclaimed. He killed hundreds. I know, Unaki nodded. And his son, I hope he is even a fragment of what his father is. Because his son, his son was kind enough to sell the legacy of the Yondaime to the highest bidder. Naruto froze. Silence, which had been out of shock, did not lift from the room, but it changed. It felt far heavier than before. The implications of the Tsuchikage words were far, far stronger than what they appeared at first sight, and Tsunade knew that even if they were false, to claim such a thing. He was kind enough to show that his love for Konoha did not extend past money itself, the Tsuchikage slowly added. He was also smart enough to display that he, the Kyuubi Jinhiriki, the son of the Yondaime, did not love his village at all. There was a feral smirk on Unaki's face. This is why, I think he would become my most prized student and one of the most loved Tsuchikage ever, after me of course. The legacy of the Yondaime? Tsunade asked slowly. The Hiraishin. Of course, Unaki smiled back. Naruto stilled. No, it was the Raiznan. He had delivered the Raiznan. Yet Unaki was lying, but if he said the truth, if he didn't, he could still deny. If he did, he'd have to admit having taken the Raiznan scroll from the cache his father had placed in the Konoha cemetery. You'll pardon me if I find your lack of proof. Soon after Tsunade said that, the scroll that Naruto knew contained the Raiznan popped out from within the Tsuchikage's robes. Let us say, he gave me a bonus to begin with. The smile gracing the lips of Unaki was positively wicked and feral, like that of a wolf who has just found its prey. The intermediary of our exchange, by the way, sends his regards. The way the Tsuchikage looked at him then, there was no doubt. The old man knew he was there, beneath the mask. Naruto began to sweat. Kakuzu had sold the Raiznan to Uegakur. Unaki was lying about possessing the Hiraishin, but the Raiznan? Oh, he had that down, he was sure of it. The Mizukage giggled then, a harmonious chuckle that escaped her full lips. How amusing. To see such a thing, she looked towards Tsunade, who was standing flabbergasted at such a revelation. I might be new to this cage business, but are all summits as interesting as this one? Quiet, the Kaze cage said smoothly, silencing the Mizukage. This is an interesting conundrum, the leader of Suna flexed his fingers together. On one side, we have a seemingly excellent offer, but on the other, I wonder if the true extent of Unaki is not simply to grab for him the entire legacy of the Yondaime and turn it against Konoha. How difficult would it be, I assume, to offer protection from Konoha's assassins to the betrayer that is Naruto Namikaze. At the mention of the word betrayer, Naruto had to hold back his tongue from screaming that he wasn't a traitor, because in the end, he was one. Sure, he had acted out of fear and because he hadn't wanted to leave Fu in the hands of Kakuzu, but it was unmistakable what he was. He was a traitor. The Kaze cage smiled towards Tsunade. Of course I know his name, the ground whispered it to my ear, shall we put it like that? He carefully tapped on the table's surface. As I see it, Unaki's offer is actually quite clear-cut and fair. On one side, he will try to bring Naruto to his side. On the other, he will have to allow the Toad Sage within his country, but the man will be limited to following Naruto around 24 hours a day, preventing him from spying. The Raiznan technique is clearly proven to be in the possession of Uegakur, but for the Hiraishin, we are still in doubt over that, the Kaze cage hummed. Why would I accept the offer then? If Naruto really betrayed Konoha, then I should place him into custody rather than let him go into an enemy village. Tsunade remarked, her right index creating a sharp crack on the surface of the table where she had begun drumming her fingers on. If not outright extract the Kyuubi from him. Ah, my dear Godame Hokage, the Kaze cage remarked. But if you do let him go, would it not be a show of goodwill for the other nations? You do possess far more Jinhiriki than the other countries, and power begets trouble most of the time. There was a quiet moment of contemplation, once more, in the room. It lasted only a heartbeat, but Naruto's throat felt constricted and his tongue dry. He needed to get outside, to get some fresh air or drink some water. He'd go through a blizzard too, if only to cool his head. I need time to think this through, Tsunade grumbled. And this isn't the reason I called the summit in the first place. No, but it is the reason Uegakur will accept to help you, Unaki remarked calmly. And you can tell your wolf to come visit me as soon as possible. My proposals, after all, are not limited to having you as my spokesperson. If he actually wishes to betray, he will find that Uegakur can be extremely accommodating. Then Unaki smiled, and in that moment Tsunade knew she just knew that something was terribly wrong with the entire affair. Then I suppose we will advance our own, the Raikage remarked. You can either hand back the Nibi Jinhiriki, or we'll just let the land of the sky work its way through Konoha. My, the Kazekage said then. It seems like treaties are really made of ink and paper, rather than honor and promises. The man cocked his head to the side. Then again, to assume honor would mean to be dealing with samurai, not shinobi. Is there a point you're trying to make? The Raikage huffed. Yes, the Kazekage nodded. I say, you are surprisingly close to Otogaku, are you not? I wonder, if certain transactions of weaponry were to become public, who would suffer? If certain key documents made their way elsewhere, in the wrong hands. Call your hand, Kazekage, I growled. I'm not one to tolerate bluffing, especially one as bad as yours. You sold weapons to the Mizukage's loyalist forces and to the rebels, which is fine, for an arms dealer. Yet, you also sold the rebels' locations to the loyalists themselves. Then again, you did not know that the Mizukage would soon receive money from the Gato Corporation, nor reinforcements from Omegaku, did you? How do you know that, Kazekage? It was the Mizukage who spoke softly then. I had one of Omegaku's caravans intercepted, the Kazekage smiled. From there the ledgers told me the entire story. Infiltrating a civilian corporation was easy work afterwards. It was trickier to find the trail of weapons and information exchange of Kyumegaku, but I still managed it in the end. A few documents and pictures appeared from the man's sleeves, sliding across the table until they reached their intended targets. It's not over yet, he admitted with a smile. From Uegaku, we have a request for minerals that the Land of Claws was happy to oblige, which brings us to the next point. Military production of Uegaku's forges has increased. They're actually preparing ships to launch an attack upon the neutral countries of the Land of Tea and Moon, but Kumo has its eyes on them too, of course. Here Orochimaru smiled, showing the bright white teeth that belonged to the Kazekage's skin. Which is why the deal sounds rotten to the core, Tsunade. The Kazekage stood. He needs a 9 to defeat an 8, and he doesn't plan on letting the boy live further than when he becomes useless, but if he manages to get his little granddaughter pregnant anyway, he gets bonus points when he later will try to tear apart Konoha and install a puppet Hokage. The Kazekage made a mock bow. I applaud you all for your sickening idiocy in planning ways to backstab and tear apart each other. Ranging from the Mizukage's ploy of trying to get Uzushiagaku's mainland back with a fake Uzumaki heir, to the Kyuzagaku's ambassador who is waiting for his chance to ask for the usage of the Gakuraku no Hako, which has returned into his hands after an Umbu delivered 2 Sharinanais where they were needed. Slowly, the Kazekage began to clap. You never fail to amaze me, with your incessant need to backstab, betray, and achieve a greed so high it is a wonder any of you can still be civil to one another. The man shook his head. Then again, you are but a minuscule speck of the true devastation that rings around the world. Anyone has ever been south, beyond the elemental countries? There's an entire region devastated by war, which isn't even something to bother with. Orochimaru rolled his eyes. Considering what lies hidden in the so-called industries of Uegaku. Kazekage. Unaki's voice was a low growl. Oh, shut your mouth you old relic, Orochimaru shot back. Diplomacy? Diplomacy between shinobi? Let the daimyo have their courts and their ambassadors, we are shinobi. Our diplomacy lies in the gold, doesn't it, Naruto-kun? Naruto's breath hitched behind the mask. He took a step back. Suddenly, he felt observed by everyone else and cursed his stupidity beneath the mask. Naruto-kun, I had such high hopes for you, the Kazekage shook his head. I hoped you would not fall, your world of peace, Naruto, but then again, you are not Hokage yet, are you? So tell me, Naruto-kun, can a traitor believe in a dream that requires trust to work? Naruto swallowed, but did not talk as the Toad Sage beat him in answering. Orochimaru. Jiraiya spoke then. Was it Orochimaru who told you that? How? Not even my spy network could reach into Uegaku's foundries and we suspected a lot, but I would be a horrible spy if I were to reveal my agents, the Kazekage chuckled. You think you possess a spy network, Jiraiya? You possess a bunch of imbeciles who drink themselves to a stupor every day and every night, of whores that spend more time with their legs open than with their ears on the ground. The Kazekage hummed once more. Then again, you didn't know that the Sandaime personally ordered Orochimaru to infiltrate Kumigakure and make the previous Gyakijin hierarchy lose control of its tailed beast, did you? The Raikage jumped to his feet, slamming his hands against the table as he yelled a powerful "What? We have an alliance, Kazekage!" Tsunade exclaimed. "No, Tsunade," the Kazekage smiled as he shook his head. "You had one with the Kazekage." The man's hand went to his face and slowly, in front of everyone else, the flesh was twisted and pulled out like it were nothing more than a mask. Orochimaru of the Sun watched with a smirk on his face the looks of shock and wonder of the rest of the cage assembled, and he laughed at their expressions that soon morphed into understanding and then ire. The Kazekage was no saint either, mark my words, and he did make many deals with me to boot, but that is no longer important. One should not talk ill of the deceased now, should he? The next moment, he became intangible as attack after attack washed over him in the form of wind blades, kunao, random bursts of explosions. Even Unaki tried to pulverize the spot he was on. When their attacks all failed, he walked forward and slowly began to clap in the middle of the destroyed room. "Very well," he commented. "Very, very well," he drawled out. "Oh Orochimaru? What have you done?" Jiraiya's voice came out then as he watched his traitorous teammate smirk at the assembled cage. Completely unscathed, Orochimaru of the Sun was smiling at them. It was a nightmare. It had to be a dream, a horrible one. There was no other explanation for it. "Let me tell you," he said, showing his Sharingan blazing with amusement, "that while your actions are endearing, they cannot stop me. I am immortal. I am invincible." He made a mocking gesture of bowing towards Mifune. "And I'm the most honorable person among this bunch of thieves and liars." "The Sharingan, the Raikage muttered. "Well, if I get your head it just means I'll keep it for posterity mounted on my wall. Unfortunate as it is, I'm not really here to talk more," Orochimaru shrugged. "I just wanted to tell you all, a word of warning if so you wish to consider this." He clasped his hands together. "I know everything. In our world, knowledge is power. I know all there is to know about all of you. By tomorrow if I so wish I could plant a kunao in the heart of anyone present in this room, and you would be unable to stop me." The Snake Sun shook his head. "Yet my destruction would be limited, surgical even. I dislike having to face rubble and chaos, I prefer tidy order. This is thus my word of warning towards you all, fight each other, kill each other, but you will always be beneath me." Amusing, is it not? You are all but pathetic excuses, born to breed hatred and violence in the world, and finally, the world has answered back your calls. He spun around. 1 year from now, I will claim what is my due." His Sharingan eyes shone as he began to disappear. "Kill each other before then, and I will enjoy watching your senseless slaughtering ensure." Before anyone could react, Orochimaru of the Sun was gone. Naruto closed his eyes. The actions of the Snake Sun made no sense. He had brought forth distrust, but then again nothing excessively worth angering. It was then that the smell of fire and the sharp sound of ground cracking ensued. Everyone jumped away as the floor gave way to dark flames that burned through the ground itself in their devouring hunger. Naruto's feet slid across the smooth surface all the way to the above wall, where he unleashed a Rasengan to create a safe passage for the Hokage and Jiraiya to follow through. As they ran up, towards the rooftop of the tower that held the cage summit, Naruto's breathing grew ragged. What was he going to do now? "Boy," Tsunade's voice came stern and demanding. "We will talk more about this later." He shivered. That voice, it didn't promise anything good at all. He stilled and lowered his body down on the ground just as a giant shuriken enflamed with black flames soared through the air slightly above him. Had he remained standing, he'd have been sliced in half. Jiraiya stopped, looking towards the figure clad in the Akatsuki cloak. Itachi stood there, his eyes narrowed. "Amaterasu." The moment those words were whispered through the blearing snowy wind, the same black flames erupted once more. The aim of his eyes, however. It was not Tsunade, or he the target. Naruto was soon engulfed within a circle of them, unable to move or jump as they formed a veritable barrier surrounding him. "Brat! Get back in!" Jiraiya yelled, hoping the boy would be smart enough. "I asked one thing to the Hokage," Itachi accused, pointing his finger towards Tsunade. For my brother to be safe I exterminated my clan. Well, this is me, evening the scale, a Jinhuriki for a dead clan. Then, Itaka closed his right hand in a fist as his main Jakyushari-non bled. The Uchiha then jumped backwards, as Tsunade's punch came barreling down on the side of the tower his feet were on. Large cracks appeared on the point of impact, cracking and destroying good chunks of the tower's walls as they fell downwards. The Toad Sage swallowed in nervousness. That wasn't good. Jiraiya hadn't seen Naruto enter the tower, but he hadn't heard anyone scream, so he sincerely hoped the boy had survived. He went quickly through hand seals, extracting a scroll from his vest as he charged ahead. When the eyes of Itaka went over to him, he brought the scroll up just in time to absorb the Amaterasu flames. He ground his teeth as he felt the heat wash over the paper. If even a single tongue of fire passed by, it would burn him for 7 days and 7 nights, and he'd have to amputate the limb to avoid a horrible death. Behind him, Tsunade pushed forward from his right side, forcing Itaka to stop gazing at him and dodge the incoming blow by quietly pushing his body to the side. Jiraiya jumped forward, ignoring the feeling of gravity trying to get him to smash against the ground as he flung a volley of shurikens to distract Itaka, while Tsunade kept the pressure on the traitorous Uchiha with her fists. Tsunade. You're going to bring down the tower. I'll pay for it later. The Slug Sunin screamed back. That's not the problem. Jiraiya grumbled as summoned a stone sword from the holy mount of toads, before slamming it in a long arch against Itaka's own blade that the boy had brought forth from his cloak's sleeve. The main Jakyushari-non of Itaka bled as Jiraiya kept his gaze firmly on the shinobi's cloak. The problem arrived when Itaka unclasped it and let gravity bring it down as he burned the cloth with Amaterasu and then sliced Ti into hundreds of fragments that were scattered by the wind and the gravity. Jiraiya brought both hands together, summoning a wall just in the nick of time. A wall made of the stomach of a Mount Toad. He was sure whoever's stomach he had used would certainly have a word with him within the next day, but it was an emergency. The flames burned through the flesh as he deftly circled around the tower while Tsunade pressed on undaunted. The Amaterasu fragments pulverized before they could touch her as lightning sparked through the pores of her skin. Why are you doing this, Itaka? You're going to start a war. Tsunade barked out. Orochimaru is the one who took your brother's eyes. He is also the one who told me the truth. He told me the real reason the massacre happened. The Uchiha clan wasn't slaughtered because of a coup, but because with our Sharingan, we could control the Baijuya, and extract them from their Jinhuriki. Tsunade gritted her teeth. That's a myth. It isn't, when you prove it true. Itaka yelled back, but it matters not. Everything will wash away in the flames of purification. The world of the shinobi ends with this incoming war. May you suffer and die. Both eyes of Itaka shone as a giant construct of chakra materialized to shield him from Jiraiya's attempt to attack him from his sides with 2 Kage Bunshin. For the sins you have committed. Weren't you the pacifist, Itaka? Jiraiya ground out as his clones disappeared in puff of smoke. The real Toad Sage was at the top of the tower, drawing upon a scroll. What happened to you? As my eyes lost their light, the traitorous Uchiha commented, they opened to the truth, and in that instant, the S-rank missing ninja jumped to the side, avoiding the crumbling tower that the latest kick from Tsunade had broken beyond repair. Jiraiya cursed under his breath as he jumped too, letting go of the scroll as he summoned a toad to cushion the fall. Gamabunta answered the call. Tsunade flickered to land atop the toad boss too, but by then it was too late, Itaka was long gone. Jiraiya began to curse loudly. He just hoped Naruto was fine. Zabuza of the Hidden Mist was a master of the Kirigaku no Jutsu, and he was not stupid. In the middle of a fire however, using that technique came with quite the difficulty. Still, when he had seen the boy responsible for the probable death of Haku there had been no requests from Konoha in exchange for the girl, so he had no doubt she was dead. He had taken his chance the moment he had watched him leave. The boy was Naruto Namikaze, the son of the Yondaime, the Kyuubi Jinhuriki. He was the one who had nearly killed Haku the first time, and he had no doubt that in the end, he had done the deal. The Mizukage probably knew what he was up to, but she hadn't yet stopped him, so everything was fine. He watched the boy fall from the ceiling as black flames consumed all around him, and just as the brat was dusting off and stumbling back up, he struck as fast as he could with a vicious stab. The blade pierced the Umbu operative straight through the back, snapping away 3 ribs as it tore a lung and emerged from the other side. Stabbing with a giant broadsword was lethal, no questions asked. "This is for Haku, bastard," he grumbled as he kicked the corpse off the blade. The cleaver, who shone brightly as it fed upon the iron of it to regenerate its sharpness, drank the blood avidly. "Rot in hell." He turned to leave. The body twitched. Zabuza spun around and brought up his sword just in time as a chakra-laced claw slammed into him and sent him flying out of the tower before it collapsed. Zabuza landed upon the hard snow as a blizzard began to pick up in intensity, eyeing the opponent in front of him. The boy was still standing, pale blue flames burning through his wounds and closing them one after the other. With a sickening noise of cracking bones, the ribs regrew and returned to their rightful position. The lung repaired, his eyes narrow, Naruto touched the wound he had suffered and chuckled. "This is new," he acquiesced. "But I like it." In the middle of the blizzard, Zabuza spun and sliced ahead just as Naruto jumped up in the air to avoid the swiping motion of ice needles that formed alongside the blade and then had been thrown by the motion. Zabuza closed in, making an arch as his enemy parried with a frigging tanto. Wind chakra flew through the blade of Naruto, holding down against one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist-own blade. It wouldn't last, but it would be enough to get some distance. 5 Kage Bunshin popped into existence as Naruto pushed his body away from the Kirigakure shinobi. The 5 tried to stab the man, only for him to push them in midair, exploding in puffs of smoke when Zabuza's cleaver spun to slice through them all. "Running, are we?" Zabuza growled. "A shinobi who doesn't run isn't worthy of being a shinobi," Naruto quipped back as the blade sliced through his neck. There was a puff of smoke, and the Kage Bunshin disappeared. "Damn Jinchuriki," Zabuza snarled. He knew he should retreat. The boy, if he was smart, had probably retreated already. The snow increased in intensity, before a snarl forced Zabuza to twist and avoid a slash from claws. His chest sprayed out 5 thin lines, like a cat paw scratching him, yet it was so deep the blood was pouring out and spraying on the snow itself. At the same time, the demon of the hidden mist flung his fist against the enemy's face, the punch connecting with the umbu mask of the wolf and splintering it into fragments that fell on the ground, while the owner of the mask retreated in the shadows once more. Zabuza exhaled slowly, readying his blade. He had seen the brat's face now. He had haunted cerulean eyes, gaunt cheeks, and pale blonde hair. He looked more like a living dead, rather than a breathing shinobi. The strength behind his attacks, however, it was all there. "Zabuza-sama," Haku's voice called to him from the middle of the snow. "Come. Genjutsu won't work on me, boy," Zabuza muttered, his eyes looking elsewhere. "When you saved me from hunger, in that corner, I was glad, Zabuza-sama, please, I am real." He shook his head and then thrust his blade behind him, just in time to stab once more through the Jinchuriki's midsection, who had tried to silently creep behind him. This time, he plunged the sword down on the snow with the boy. The Jinchuriki was hissing, his eyes shining blue, as he seemed to be growling and grabbing at his blade with both hands. As if he could lift the butcher's cleaver with his bare hands, or stop him from plunging it down to the hilt in the monster. "You should have left when you had the chance," Zabuza growled. "And this genjutsu? It just made me angrier." The blade of the swordsman of the mist met with the bare hands of the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, who stilled the sword and gripped tightly onto it, actually stopping its descent. Zabuza's eyes narrowed. "What the hell are you, kid?" "You can call me," Naruto growled, blood burning brightly down his lips and evaporating, "your death." Naruto slammed his fist forward, light blue flames erupting from his hand as they punched the demon hidden in the mist, sending him to fly in the air. The Kirigakure shinobi left behind a trail of torn-apart rock and snow as he flew, but he did not let go of the Kyubikurei Basho, bringing it away with him in the air as a rivulet of blood fell from the blade's side. With an inhuman roar, Naruto slowly got back up on all 4 as blue flames burned his wound to a close. "Your sins," he growled. "The deaths you caused," he snarled. "I will purify you from them." A light sheen of blue chakra erupted and morphed into flames, as a tail made of pale blue began to shimmer on his back. Zabuza stumbled back on his feet just as the light sheen of a ghost trudged in front of him. No, to be more correct, a horde of them. He had killed many. He had killed far too many to count. There wasn't just a few dozens, no, there were hundreds. Thousands of ghosts, of people killed both by order of Yagura and for his own entertainment or gain. People killed, students of the Mist Academy he had killed. And they were all watching him. Why? One of his childhood friends asked him, eyeing with empty eyes his blade, was that worth it, Zia-chan? His mother looked at him with scorn. Out of all the choices, a lapdog always, You are bound to serve me, not some monster with a bloodline. Yagura's own ghost showed up, snarling at him as if he was still alive. Zabuza's eyes shone with fury as the ghost of Haku appeared next. He gritted his teeth and grasped tightly on the handle of Kubikaribasho with both his hands, as a thick purple miasma left his shoulders forming a demonic shroud on his back. You know, brat, he whispered as his intense glare turned murderous. If you wanted to piss me off, you managed. It. With a terrifying roar, Zabuza swept ahead his blade as he twisted his entire frame, creating a devastating typhoon of ice as water chakra flowed in the sword. Naruto's arms went up as he roared back, the blue flames burning through the unleashed wave of ice that slammed into him. The sizzling sound of ice melting into water and then of the water itself boiling reached Zabuza's ears, as the swordsman jumped in midair to land a devastating downward swipe on the brat's head. The tail made of cerulean chakra came up to parry it, and Zabuza ground his teeth as he roared and pushed through it, slicing it in half and continuing the Kubikaribasho movement all the way till it hit the flesh of the boy's chest. Blood sprayed for but an instant, before the wound healed and the Kirigakure shinobi had to bring up his blade in a parry position, holding his ground against a punch thrown by the Jinhiriki. If this is the extent of your power, Zabuza growled, then let me show you how a real demon fights. The purple shroud that had slowly surrounded Zabuza's back morphed into a diabolic-looking face, and as the wave of murderous desire rampaged through the ground, Naruto remained unaffected. If anything, a throaty chuckle escaped his lips. Only this. Naruto growled. Let me show you what death is all about. The wind died down. The snow stilled. The colors lost their vibrancy. The white snow became gray, dirty, as waves of chill and cold that far surpassed normality poured through Zabuza's entire body as a set of bright cerulean eyes locked with his. In that instant, Zabuza flung a kunao at the brat. A small floating patch of sand rose to block it, and Naruto simply smiled. The sand floated around him, grinding and twirling against the snow and itself. Well, Naruto exhaled. Do you really wish to continue? Zabuza's eyes narrowed. You're reaching the end of the rope, aren't you? The demon growled. I can see it. The flames that surrounded Naruto's body were flickering with far less intensity than before, the tail swishing behind him reducing itself of length like the fuse of a candle. Naruto ground his teeth in frustration. He didn't know where the power came from, but he had used it. It would be stupid not to, especially with such an enemy. Carefully, he lowered his body down as he prepared to charge ahead on the melted snow. A few snowflakes fell between the two, as Zabuza readied his blade again. You know, the demon hidden of the mist remarked. I take back what I said, you truly are a demon, Zabuza muttered. Only a demon would have those eyes, after all. I was an Umbu back in my days, Zabuza added as the silence stretched on, both shinobi waiting for their chance to strike. I have not lost my touch and I fought against Wolf once too. Wearing a mask doesn't make you as strong as its previous wielder. Calling yourself an Umbu doesn't make you one. Zabuza's teeth bit tightly on the bandages around his mouth, tearing them apart as he revealed his face. So, from a demon to another, I'll let you see my face before I kill you, and then Zabuza disappeared as a thick cold fog sprouted from the very ground. Larynx, Zabuza whispered from the right side, as Naruto hastily ducked downwards. A kunao sliced through his neck all the same, forcing him to choke on his blood as he quickly removed it with a wet lurching noise. He gagged as looked around frantically. Spine, a sharp crack resonated as the Kubikaribasho pierced Naruto's spine, making the boy scream in pain as the fires of his chakra proceeded to heal the wound all the same, leaving him trembling on the ground. Lungs, a sharp pain passed through him, as twin elongated kunaos pierced his lungs and made his breathing ragged. They were not removed. Liver, another kunao pierced his body. Jugular vein, another kunao, passing through his neck and letting him bleed out. Collarbone, one more, painfully inserted in his neck. Kidney. More pain flared through him, agonizing and horrendous, and finally, Naruto was no longer breathing by that point. Heart. The cubic Aribisho fell down sharply against the boy's chest, impaling him there, as blood began to pool on the ground all around him. The snow began to fall once more as the fog lifted, as Zabuza looked up, to the grayish sky. There. He exhaled. Haku, I've avenged you. A single snowflake fell on the Kirigaku's shinobi face, melting into a tear that slid down his cheek. He never heard the sharp rock spear pierce through his heart and smash him on the ground, tearing him savagely apart. Naruto was in complete darkness. Around him, he could see nothing but a thin light away in the distance. It was then that he heard a pulse. It was a heartbeat, but it was enormous. The titanic heart wherever it was thumped again. He looked around, but could not find it in the middle of the darkness that surrounded him. The place was supposed to be quiet. It was supposed to be a place to relax. It wasn't. Darkness had crept through the room. He could imagine it, as it once was, filled with lights, candles, and warmth. He could remember it, the laughter that ensued and echoed as she played with her brothers and sisters. There was only happiness back then, and while there was sadness, it never lasted long. Then slowly her brothers and sisters began to disappear. She felt alone. Her father no longer was there. She was alone. There was no one to play with, no one to console her when she cried. She was alone. She felt it then. People died, she knew it. She felt it then, people died, because she had to do her job. Purification, of the soul, was it? To reincarnate, better? She could not remember her purpose, but she was there and she lived and breathed for as long as there would be death. The screams of the dying, their pain, agonizing, wasn't it? There was another thump sound, the giant heartbeat noisily pulsed again. She was but a fragment. But a fragment of infinity was still infinity, wasn't it? We need but a single piece, the world will provide the rest. Then she felt pain. Am I dead? Naruto muttered, as he looked around. His voice echoed in the inky black darkness. Course not. A voice quipped back. If you were, you'd be, dead. He spun around as fast as he could, bringing up his fists as if expecting an attack. He blinked. There was a pale blue cat looking back at him, with twin tails swishing around. The cat's voice was childish and petulant as it stretched its back and purred happily. I'm Madatabi. What's your name? You're the Nibi. Naruto muttered back. A piece of it, really, Madatabi remarked. Then again, a piece of water is still water and taking fire from a fire gives you two fires rather than one, right? He closed his eyes and shook his head. Where am I then? Oh, your body went into shock. Nasty thing, just inches away from dying, he stabbed you through your heart to boot. Ah, wait, what? His eyes widened, how am I still alive with my heart stabbed? Really? The Nibi raised an eyebrow. You have 3 different Baijuya's chakras into you, brat. You think you're going to die anytime soon. So I'm immortal? No, but then again the guy who reduced you like this doesn't know what we know, Madatabi shrugged. He could cup out your heart with a teaspoon, and you'd still be alive afterwards. You know what chakra is, right? Are you going to give me a chakra lesson, or are you going to tell me how I'm going to leave? How rude, the Nikomata scoffed. I'm all here, trying to be helpful. Never trust a Baijuya. Oh my, thank you, the two-tailed cat rolled her eyes. Your trust is of the uttermost importance for me. While you're at it, do you want a cup of I don't care or a nice biscuit made with, you are a worthless stain and a waste of my time, kindly shut your mouth. He gawked at the cat. Very well, Madatabi drawled. Now, if I have your attention. She spun on herself, her cat-like appearance becoming surprisingly human as she morphed into a perfect replica of Naruto himself. If not for the cat ears. He shuddered looking at them twitch. Well, the Nikomata muttered. Chakra is in every living creature. That's as easy as it sounds, but the complete definition of it is that, as long as there's chakra, A creature is alive. She raised a hand, as if to shush him from interrupting. Chakra permeates every living cell. When someone is wounded, chakra moves to close the wound. When someone is grievously wounded, more chakra is used and so forth, until there is no more chakra to use. That's the basic principle of chakra healing after all. You use chakra from an outside source to enhance the healing properties of your own chakra. So, I'm still alive. Oh yes, and into a world of pain as soon as you wake up, the Nico rendition of him nodded. You see, you have 3 Baijiu inside you. 3 enormous chakra batteries of which 2 are tightly sealed into you even beyond your death, and 1 myself that is who is outside. He paled. Ah, don't make a fuss about it, Madatabi rolled her eyes. It's not like I care, I'm just a fragment. Sure, I'm real, and all, but I'd need decades to go back to the power I'd be being hold on. I'll still have you sealed, Naruto deadpanned. 1 was enough. I don't care, Madatabi remarked. Sealed, not sealed, doesn't matter. I'm not my whole self. I don't care, eventually, I'll return to the earth and from there to my whole self if you don't seal me, or if you do seal me I'll just hang around. You are taking this, strangely, Naruto's sweat dropped as he nervously chuckled. I'm a Nikomata. Technically, we're used in being parasites of other people's skin, until the moment we rip ourselves out of their bodies in a shower of blood and gore. There was a dreamy look on Madatabi's face then. You have no idea how nice it feels, to shower in blood. Now that's more normal, Naruto grumbled under his breath. A sharp spike of pain erupted through his chest then, forcing him down on one knee as he gripped his jacket. The Madatabi just looked at him with a bright smile, and waved. See you later. He trembled and gagged as he opened his eyes to the cold surface of the land of iron's ground. A light sheen of frost and snow covered him, as his skin was a pale blue. He could see tiny plumes of smoke rise from his wounds, as they all slowly closed. He breathed in pain as his torn lungs mended and stitched back together. Around him, there was silence. Slowly, the ice cracked as he stood up. He looked around for a moment, and then stilled. The cubic Aribisho was there, piercing the ground near the destroyed body of Zabuza of the Hidden Mist. The man was dead. Carefully, he trudged forward. Whoever had killed him had left behind the blade. His hand slowly went for it, clasping around the handle as he pulled it up. It felt light in his hand. He gave one last look at Zabuza's torn-apart body, and then closed his eyes. He bowed his head once. I'm sorry. Then he left. The question was, where was he going to go? Chapter 53, Show me your true self, liar. Sakura looked towards the stone slab in the corner of Training Ground 7 and clenched her fists. In the middle of the night, calmly, she took out the chisel. With a tranquil appearance, holding on a bright smile on her face, she chipped away with controlled hammer strokes the name that she refused to see on that stone. She knew what she was doing was wrong, and was akin to vandalism, but did she care as long as the name disappeared from that slab? No. She didn't. Naruto Namikaze. Someone had written his name on the slab probably by mistake or to make her angry, and she now would correct the error by removing it. Then she would find the bastard who had dared write the name of Naruto on that stone, and she would make him suffer by breaking every single bone of his body. Because Naruto wasn't dead. He couldn't be dead, because she refused to believe that. She refused to believe he could die. He could not die. He could not be beneath the ground. They hadn't found his body, but yet they had still gone ahead and claimed him dead. He wasn't dead. She refused to accept it. She refused to accept a reality where Naruto was dead and beneath the ground. Naruto wasn't dead. He wasn't still. Naruto was somewhere, most certainly kept prisoner against his own will, and nobody understood that. They all believed him dead. Burned to a crisp by Amaterasu, burned to a crisp and for no reason whatsoever but as revenge from a petty S-rank shinobi. A traitorous Uchiha. The older brother of Sasuke. She had no tears left to shed, so she simply smiled. She had no screams of anguish left in her throat, no yells, and no angry accusations. She had nothing left. She had no one. She knew she was purposefully ignoring Sai's presence, but it just wasn't the same. Sai was a friend, a good friend, a really good friend, even probably on the same scale of friendship as Ino had been before they had broken off contacts, but he wasn't on the same ladder as Naruto. He had accepted his death. He had gone to his funeral and held his head low like everyone else. Comparatively few people had. She hadn't. That betrayal still stung her. The funeral, she had refused to participate. Her sensei's words, she had refused to listen to them. Naruto was alive somewhere, and as she turned to dust with her right fist the light bit of rock with his name etched upon, she turned to leave. "You know," a voice called. "I used to do the same," a silver-haired shinobi called to her, in the shadows next to a tree. "They reprimanded me thrice before I stopped." Sakura turned her gaze to the jounin, narrowing her eyes. "You'll rattle on me?" The man had a mask covering most of his face. His name was Kakashi. Wasn't he the sensei of Sasuke? No, the jounin shook his head. "Want to talk about it?" He was flipping through the pages of Ika Ika consoling the mournful widow and had a general bored look in his eyes that made her frown. Did he really expect her to open up to someone she barely knew? "Why should I bother?" "Because I will rattle on you otherwise." She scoffed and made a tisk sound. She couldn't poison him. She supposed someone would miss him. "Please, don't look at me as if you're planning my murder," Kakashi drawled out. "All right," she sweetly remarked with a bright smile and her eyes half closed. "Then I won't look at you. Period." "You want to know something funny?" Kakashi retorted. "I think you should actually hope he is dead." Sakura's eyes smoldered with fury as she flung at the man a kunao as fast as she could. The jounin merely deflected it with the hard cover of his book, and then commented. "Think about it. If he isn't dead, why hasn't he come back? He might be a prisoner. Or he might be wounded." Sakura barked back, angrily stomping on the ground as she walked forward towards the jounin. "You mean the Jinhiriki of the Kyuubi? The one who has complete control over his Baijuya?" Kakashi snorted. "Who are you trying to convince, me, or yourself?" "Naruto wouldn't betray Konoha," Sakura murmured, her eyes glazing over. "He just wouldn't." "Whatever makes you sleep at night," Kakashi remarked. "As long as it keeps you away from the monument, anything's fine." Sakura clenched her fists. How dared he come here in the middle of the night and snipe at her? Didn't he have better things to do, like using the porn he had in his hands? "I don't know if you understand it yet, but we are in the middle of a crisis," Kakashi deadpanned. "This is a veritable Cold War, where the only wild card left is whether Naruto is alive or not. Konoha is in the crosshair of enough countries to make the future of it being nothing more than a wasteland a reality. Kyumigakuer, Kirigakuer, Iwagakuer, heck, even Tsunagakuer might all attack or form alliances to destroy us. The only reason they don't is because they also hate one another. All that it takes is a simple spark, and then this arming up of forces will be unleashed." Kakashi's eyes turned narrow. "Do you have any idea what it means to graduate at 6 from the academy, after a single year devoted to how to prime explosive tags and throw kunao? Do you know what it means to have to walk up to an enemy outpost with a ball of rubber filled with explosives, and hope they don't kill you because you're a kid?" He took a step forward, just as Sakura paled and took one back. "Do you know what it means, to watch your friends, your comrades, your family die one after the other in the middle of war? Do you know the meaning of suffering behind a trench carved out by the blood of your teammates, trying to hold the line because reinforcements will come at dawn, only to realize there are no reinforcements, and you're alone against dozens?" His only visible eye shone with fury. "You have no idea of what war is, kid," he snarled. "And I hoped you would never have to know." Kakashi then turned, and left in silence. Sakura fell down on her knees, trembling like a leaf quaked by the wind, and there she cried. Because one part of her mind was whispering to her that if Naruto had betrayed Konoha, she had to kill him. Betrayers had to die. It was the law. And the law was everything. Sasuke grumbled. He had no idea why Kiba insisted on it. He and Shiro weren't going to fight him and Akamaru. The three-legged dog had grown to be as tall as his stomach considering it bumped its head against it quite a few times. He didn't much care that he was acting like a recluse, or that, the duck-butt Uchiha I knew would accept. He simply wouldn't fight. He could hear Ami's form pressed against his side, but he ignored that too. Whether the girl had grown up and matured or not, he didn't even want to find out. He was actually glad Shiro's head was resting on his lap barking happily. One of the few keynotes with being blind and unable to re-enter the shinobi service was that, in the end, he had a lot of time to spend in peace. "Come on, fight me," Kiba snarled. "No," Sasuke remarked. "Dog breath. Why you?" "That's enough, Kiba," Ami said, "leave Sasuke-kun alone." "But Ami," Kiba whined. "No buts. Really, ganging like that on a blind person, have you no shame? My sister said to kick his ass whenever he was moping, and what better way than spar with him?" Akamaru yipped in agreement. Shiro just kept on barking happily, as Sasuke gently scratched behind his dog's ear. "I'm not moping, dog breath. I'm enjoying the sun." "Pathetic," Kiba muttered. "Really? Where did the sourpuss, I have a certain man to kill, Uchiha go?" "He died with his eyes," Sasuke retorted hotly. "And he'll stay dead." Silence descended in the small corner of the Inuzuka's compound main house, as Sasuke carefully brought his face upwards to stare at the sky, even without eyes. "I'm fine like this." Ami suddenly said coyly. "What about restarting the clan? You can do that even without eyes, right?" "No," Sasuke's single word froze both Kiba and Ami. "That dream died together with my revenge. I'll be the last Uchiha, and with that, I'll have my final revenge on my brother. I'll not condemn someone else to carry on my grudge, or to live in hatred of what could have been if he hadn't killed our clan." Sasuke-kun," Ami murmured. "But. Ohi, idiot," Kiba barked. "What does your revenge have to do with finding a girlfriend and running like crazy?" "Kiba," Ami screeched. "Gross. That's really crass too." "What?" "Just telling the truth, an idiot's an idiot no matter what. And that's why you don't have a girlfriend, dog breath? Or is it the flea powder?" Sasuke shot back. "I'll let you know I have plenty. Like, a dozen. All around Konoha." Sasuke raised an eyebrow, his eyes closed shut. He doubted he had anyone other than his hand, but then again one could never know. Maybe Kiba had finally given in to his basic instincts and gone the deep end of bestiality. "Is that why you have bitches in heat following you around?" Sasuke asked once more. "Why wait, no." Kiba yelled back. "I'm not fucking with." "Stop it!" Ami shrieked, making Sasuke wince. "Really? Kiba, look what you've done. Sasuke-kun's turning crasser by the second because of you." "Ah, I knew it. I'll have to check on him as much as possible to avoid this from getting worse." "No, really," Sasuke drawled. "I'm fine." "Who's fine?" a female voice said then, as Sasuke's ears twitched. "Hana-san," Sasuke said politely. "Is it true that Kiba ruts with dogs? He seems pretty proud of it." Ami watched Hana's smile falter for a bit, before her eyes morphed to slits as she growled towards Kiba. The Inuzuka boy brought up his hands in defense. "That's not true, Hanane. It's not arg. Ah. It hurts. Stop it. Damn it." A squirt bottle filled with pepper spray soon appeared from Hana's sleeve, which then ended up half-emptied on the boy's coat. Sasuke's nose twitched, and his wasn't trained as much as those of the Inuzuka. "Really, what did I do to be saddled with you? Just because mom's off to the border doesn't mean you can do this, you bitch." Kiba yelled as he thoroughly scrubbed his nose with tears coming down his red and swollen face. "You're not the top dog. I'm the alpha bitch around here, you bastard, you got that?" Hana yelled right back, stomping a foot against Kiba's back and sending him sprawling on the ground with Akamaru whining about it. Shiro just ignored everything, like his master did too. Ami had to admit, it was somewhat funny watching Sasuke and his dog act precisely the same. There was a moment of absolute silence then, as if no one had anything remotely interesting to say. It lasted a mere second, and then it was gone as Ami softly whispered. "Tomorrow, we're off on patrol near Kiri, right?" "Yeah," Kiba snarled. "To think I won't see the duck butt for a month or two, fills my heart with joy." "Likewise, Dog breath, Sasuke retorted hotly. Not hearing your incessant yapping will do wonders to my brain cells. I begin to fear your stupidity is contagious. Now children, Hannah interrupted. Play nice and Kiba will get the nice red ball that goes squeak. Is there a look of joy on the mutt's face? Sasuke asked then. Because I'm clearly imagining him with sparkling eyes over that red ball. You know duck butt, Kiba growled. I preferred you when your sense of humor was non-existent. Some people can improve, Sasuke deadpanned. For others there's still the squirt bottle I suppose. Grr. Sasuke would never admit it to himself, or to the people around him. But it felt good to be there. Silence descended in the clearing after a few seconds, as his nose and ears twitched. Someone else had just arrived, and whoever it was, it smelled of a light sheen of antiseptic and alcohol, the industrial variant, for hospitals. Sakura. Ami suddenly said. Sasuke, Sakura's voice came firm and cold. I want to know one thing. Kiba's perplexed voice cut through. How do I kill your brother? Sasuke's heart skipped a beat in that instant, as his fist naturally clenched. Maybe he could have his revenge all the same? Naruto closed his eyelids for an instant. The stench of burned corpses reached his nostrils. The screams of the wounded echoed in his ears. He opened his eyes, staring at the population of a small and remote village torn apart, human after human, by a small group of Kyumigakuer shinobi. They moved not to actually slaughter them all, but to scare them into submission. A few farmers were beaten, another couple had burns on their faces or hands. Raiden techniques tore the simple huts of the civilians apart with relative ease, as the jounin guiding the operation was a scar-filled bulky man in his 50s. He was laughing out hard as he heard the screams of fright of the civilians, and the smirk on his face told it all. The man chose to scare them, not to kill them. Kyumigakuer probably needed the village, or its supplies. Naruto unclasped the butcher's cleaver, and then bent his legs forward to thrust his entire body onward, as a light sheen of chakra covered his frame. He spun as he twisted the giant blade, letting the screams soon dwindle to a shocked halt as he cleaved in half the leading shinobi of the assaulting force. Blood sprayed in the air in a thin mist, as the lower part of the Kyumigakuer ninja took a few hesitant steps, twitched, and then fell down on the ground as its upper side screamed in pain for but a moment, before dying and landing with a sick thud on the dirt a few meters away. He capitalized on the moment. A bijudama emerged from his mouth, piercing through the stomach of a kunoichi and sending her to twist in midair as her innards viciously exploded outwards. She collapsed like an empty-hand puppet, her Chiryunin vest of no use. By the second death, the rest of the Kyumigakuer troops awoke from their shock and dispersed. Running away from him, they didn't realize one tiny detail. He wasn't alone. The Yoroi Toshi of his cage bunshin thrust itself forward surrounded by wind chakra, stabbing through the heart or the stomach the retreating men and women, whose gaze widened as individuals covered in cloaks and masks blocked their way out. A particularly quick Chiryunin managed all the same to evade the lethal blow, his body flexing to the side and thrusting his own fist back at the cage bunshin, dispelling it with a single hit. The problem was that now, the shinobi in question was alone against a dozen. The villagers watched with a mixture of hope and sick fascination as their savior slammed repeatedly onto the ground the remaining enemy, the crunching noise of bones breaking and soft tissue splattering on the ground making them grimace or avert their gaze from the gory scene. Thank you, Shinobi-san, an elderly man murmured walking forward. He extended his hand, and Naruto merely looked back at him with his piercing blue gaze through his mask. We are in your debt. Is this the right direction for the land of snow? He asked back softly, pointing towards his destination. Ah, most certainly, the old man nodded quickly. Are you wishing to join Shimogakure? There was a grimace that settled on the elder's face. It is a pity the daimyo renounced to the shinobi village here, in the land of hot springs. There's no army to protect us either from the attacks. Naruto's ears twitched. Tell me, he said slowly. Any news from the world? The great countries, the old man snorted as he slowly sat down on the ground with his legs crossed, they're expanding. That's what they all say. These guys, he gestured to the corpses, they came here for supplies. The village elder refused winter's coming, and our supplies are low and so they decided to even the score. Bitterly, the man added. A village with no villagers doesn't need food, and anyway the daimyo, he doesn't care. Yogakure is nothing more than a glorified hot spring village now, and samurai are useless against shinobi. The old man growled as his voice grew heated. Naruto merely looked in the direction he had to go, and then nodded back to the old man. Thank you. Kyubikuribasho sailed then in an arc, and the old man's head flew in the air for a moment before rolling down on the ground, blood splattering on the blade. The rest of the villagers did not even have the time to scream. In the silent and scorched village, Naruto merely began to look for food with his clones. All of them were eerily quiet as they worked in looting the corpses of the Kyumo shinobi, the villagers' houses and the warehouse, which the ninja had left alone. No doubt, another group would come around to look for the fate of the first one. Supplies weren't that difficult to bring around. All it took was one shinobi with a hefty scroll carrying the food sealed within, while another acted as a decoy. The group's food scroll was soon in his hands, and as he snorted towards the corpse of their jounin, he grimaced. You shouldn't have killed the entire village, he began quietly. Forcing me to battle you lot, that's stupid. You know what happens when you do something stupid? You pay for it. You shouldn't have. The reality was that, as a missing nin, he was the enemy of everyone. As a Jinhyuriki missing nin, he was a threat to all of the nations combined. Merely with the Kage Bunshin, he knew he had enough power to level a nation, and that was without using the Bijudama. He was powerful, but the problem was to which depths he'd go in order to win. Was destroying half a country worth killing a single shinobi? Was killing an entire village worth using the Kage Bunshin? As long as he merely heft Kyubikuribasho, he was simply a lucky guy with a big sword one Akiri shinobi would recognize anywhere, but still way better than his trademarked Yoroi Toshi. The moment he used the Kage Bunshin, the moment he used a Bijudama, and the precise instant he left eyewitnesses, the enemy countries would know where he was. He couldn't trust Konohagakure. He had been afraid of the consequences of his betrayal, and so he had left. With what he had on his person, he wouldn't have gone far anyway, so as a shinobi he had stolen. As a shinobi, he had endured. As a shinobi, he had survived. He closed his eyes, letting the wind ruffle his hair, and then he trudged on. He knew very little about the world or its political situation, but he knew that if he wanted to truly be at ease, he'd need to go somewhere war would not touch. The land of frost was nothing more than a barren extension of ice and snowflakes, where the daimyo merely understood his place and granted passage to Kyumigakure shinobi on his land in exchange for leaving the country in peace. They had a shinobi village, which merely acted as a sort of guard for the population, and that was it. No bijos, no jinhyuriki, nothing worth remembering in its history. The person in charge was a certain Doto Kazuhana, while the princess of the land of snow was a certain Koyuki Kazuhana, his niece. The last bingo book entry he had grabbed from the corpse of a Kyumigakure shinobi showed him that there were no renowned entries in their missing nin category, which made it all the better. He'd live in a nice and comfortable ice hut. Naruto clicked his tongue against his teeth a moment later. Whom was he kidding? He was following some sort of basic instinct to go north, but he couldn't understand why. Something soothing was calling for him, and like a moth to the flame, he was answering the call. He knew it felt like a trap, it smelled like a trap, and it probably was a trap, but he still decided to go that way. The Matatabi was silent. Even if free to roam, the two-tailed cat remained true to his word and stayed silent in a corner of his mind. It was completely different from the giant Baijuya who had screamed against remaining a prisoner. He gave one last fleeting glance at the corpses strewn on the ground, and then disappeared in a flicker. He had a long way to go yet. A white Zetsu slowly appeared from the ground, in the middle of the village. It looked around for a single moment, making sure there really was no one left, and then smiled. He made a simple gesture of his right hand, and 10 more Zetsu appeared from the ground. The white creatures ate the Kyumigakure's shinobi corpses, and as the Zetsu morphed, taking in their appearances, the leader of the group remarked. How horrible! A Kirigakure shinobi killing people in the land of hot water, one of the swordsmen of the mist no less. We must warn the Raikage, another acquiesced. The demon of the hidden mist isn't dead as they wanted us to believe. Yet all of them were smiling with the same creepy smile as they said that. Orochimaru glanced over to where Itachi was bringing his hands up to the fire to warm them. The Uchiha still covered himself in the Akatsuki cloak, and his teeth chattered from the cold. They were deep into the passage for the Land of Frost, and as the snake sun hummed peacefully, Itachi commented. "Aren't you supposed to be cold-blooded? Aren't you even going to try to take my head?" He remarked. "If you didn't have the Sharingan, I would already have tried," Itachi muttered with his gaze unflinching as he offered a roast gecko on a stick to the snake sun. "I hope my little Hebai-chan is alright," Orochimaru lamented as he accepted the gecko and then flung it behind him. A few meters in the air, the gecko exploded in tiny pieces of burnt flesh. "I mean, it shouldn't be too difficult, but you never know with them, right?" Itachi said nothing, but merely narrowed his eyes to slits. "Oh come on Itachi-kun, enjoy life a bit more," Orochimaru chuckled. "What little you still have left, that is. If only the roles were reversed." "Ah, you would undoubtedly kill me without a fault, that much I know," Orochimaru nodded. "But I am kind-hearted, deep down, and I simply cannot tolerate seeing you in such conditions." "How fortuitous that you told me in time of your sickness, Itachi. Why, if you hadn't, I would have tried to get your body while in the Akatsuki, such was my greed." "The way you say that while smiling is extremely creepy, Orochimaru," Itachi muttered back. "Doesn't this bring back our time together as a team, Itachi?" The two missing ninjas from Konoha, guarding each other shoulder to shoulder as they fight against the unjust system of the world through senseless slaughter and bounty hunting. "Can you smell the irony from here?" "I can't even smell the rotting stench of the body you're inside of," the Uchiha said. "You expect me to smell something that doesn't exist in the first place? Now, I find offense to that. And to think we went great lengths to ensure cooperation of Zetsu-kun. Please, avoid using the kun suffix, period." A strong gust of wind flapped their cloaks. "Shishui's eye is truly special indeed," Orochimaru quipped, pitiful that it can no longer be used. Itachi bit his lips. "Then again, maybe in a few years your brother will have a brat or two, and then Uncle Itachi might just appear as a ghost." The snake sun laughed at that. "Kukyuku, or maybe Orokijiji might just make his appearance." "That image is so wrong, I will need bleach for my brain now," Itachi mumbled. "Why are you so sure he will pass by here?" "Because you aren't thinking logically, Itachi," Orochimaru quipped. "And then again, I have Zetsu trailing him, how difficult can it be to anticipate his travel vector? Why not kidnap him in his sleep?" "Ah, Itachi, Itachi, Itachi," Orochimaru made a tisk sound as he slowly slumped his shoulders, his eyes half closed. "You never were one for the subtle and gentle approach. Not everything is solvable with meaningless slaughter. Come on, think. We kidnap him and he'll try to run away. We talk to him and you'll see that he will follow us without an inkling of doubt." Itachi said nothing else, and Orochimaru merely lapsed in silence after that. "You know what the fun thing is, about giving time schedules to imbeciles?" Orochimaru remarked suddenly, standing up. "It is that when then you strike earlier, they're too stupid to understand you were playing with them." He disappeared in a flicker with Itachi soon following him. There, in the middle of the blizzard, a figure walked forward with steam surrounding his person. Naruto was not enjoying the cold. He was a shinobi, he could endure the cold, but he didn't like it at all. He was more at ease in the warmth of the sun, not in the middle of a freezing blizzard lost somewhere where the sun didn't shine and seemed to have been forgotten by the gods. Yet the call was ever so alluring. He knew it was supposed to be closer still, somewhere. He slammed his body on the ground just as a blade of wind sliced above him. Naruto rolled out of an incoming fist, that tore apart the ground he had stood on but a second before. His eyes widened in surprise when they landed on Orochimaru, who was brightly smiling in his Akatsuki cloak. "Oh. Naruto-kun. It has been a while, hasn't it?" Naruto swallowed. Orochimaru of the Sun stood in front of him, his face a mixture of crazy and scared. "Is that your idea of subtle approach?" Itachi remarked calmly, appearing right next to him. Naruto snapped his eyes from one shinobi to the other, and then felt his throat parched. How? The ground whispered to me," Orochimaru shrugged, "who was I to remain deaf to its call?" "Very well, Naruto Namikaze, let me ask you this," he strode forward calmly, both of his hands forwards as if to appear harmless. Naruto narrowed his eyes and flexed his legs, ready to run for his life. You have potential and power, Orochimaru began, but you lack a purpose, do you not? You find yourself devoid of a master's whip and an objective in life now. You escaped, out of fear or maybe out of a well-thought-out decision, and everyone else believes you dead or is smart enough to make sure you are thought dead. The Snake Sannin chuckled. The problem is you have nowhere to go and no one to trust. You'll go around for a while looking for a place to belong, but in the end, they will all fail you. The golden eyes settled warmly on him. And then, one day, you will realize that your power makes you right. It doesn't matter what laws say. It doesn't matter what other people say. It doesn't matter what a cage says, or what a daimyo says, because you have the power, and they don't. Make a hand seal, and tear down a country. Make 2, and destroy a nation. Make 3, and the world will burn. The Snake Sannin clenched his right fist in front of the boy. What I am trying to say is that everyone who has power, in the end, begins to think of an objective to complete. Why go through life without something to look forward to, after all? Some wish to make a family, watch their children grow and then die of old age. Others wish for complete world domination, for changing the system, the world. Some want revenge, sweet, sweet revenge. His voice trailed off. Yet, in the end, a purpose can't be something shoddy like, I'll protect my teammates or, I want to make friends or, I'll be Hokage. Naruto snarled as he felt a building pressure in the back of his head. Oh? What is this? Can't remember, can you? Orochimaru smiled. You know, I was sure of it the moment I saw you, quiet and silent, that Danzo would place his hands on you. He always was interested in the Kyuubi hierarchy after all, I just had to place a trap for him. One he could not avoid, he chuckled. I did plan on killing you before leaving Konoha, I told you that already, didn't I? Naruto winced as he felt pain stab through his entire body. I decided to weaken your seal instead, let it deteriorate. I was pretty sure Danzo would step in with his Fuinjutsu knowledge, but the old crone didn't rise to the bait and the seal was left to rot a bit at a time. The Snake Sannin shrugged. I made you into a ticking bomb, and yet, you went way beyond my expectations. I'm not a bomb, Naruto hissed. No? Then tell me, Naruto Uzumaki, the boy whose very own surname was stripped away from him, the one whose parents were hidden from, whose identity as Jinhiriki kept silent, who was hated, scorned, blamed for things beyond his control. The wind died down around them. If you're not a tool of Konoha, if you're not a faithful shinobi of Konoha, if you don't have teammates to protect or a dream, what are you? Naruto swallowed and looked to the floor. His clenched fist felt warm, as he realized blood was dripping from his palms where his nails had dug in. You want to know the answer, Naruto? Orochimaru smiled lightly. You. The voice trailed off for an instant. Me. That's not true. He hotly retorted. His eyes shone with fury, yet the nagging sensation of him being, no, he could not be right. He refused to believe in that. No. Orochimaru laughed at that. What am I, exactly? A powerful traitorous shinobi from Konoha? I was born an orphan, apprenticed under the Sandaime who became like a father to me. My teammates were a bunch of wrecks, one worse than the other, the Snake Sannin mumbled. One left for his voyages, the other lost hope after the death of her family and love, yet I remained loyal. Naruto hadn't realized it till then, but Orochimaru was now literally in front of him, speaking smoothly and slowly. He couldn't jump away however, because just looking into the man's eyes was hypnotic, to say the least. I remained in Konoha, loyal, waiting for my chance at becoming Hokage, waiting for my chance to prove my power. The power of my intelligence was the best Konoha could hope for to defend from its enemies. Orochimaru exhaled slowly. Yet in the end, your father was chosen. The Sandaime said it was because he feared for what I would do with the power, but the true reason was another, a darker one, a deeper one. His eyes shone. You can't control a smart person. You need dumb bastards in power, or how else can you move their strings? With intelligence comes responsibility. With intelligence, comes the knowledge that what you do, how you do it, for what reason you do it, it bears a weight, and with the weight the puppet becomes too heavy to move. Naruto took a step backwards then. You were guided, Orochimaru said, taking a step forward. Step after step towards a goal, he smiled. A prophecy foretold that Jiraiya's apprentice would usher forth an age of peace, or one of complete destruction. Both of his hands shot forth then, grasping onto Naruto's shoulders and pinning him in place. The man told the Sandaime, and the Sandaime knew he had to act. He couldn't risk you becoming a tool of destruction, and so he kept you weak. He kept you under control. He gave you nothing more than scraps from the table that was your legacy. Orochimaru smiled. I can give you the entire feast, Naruto Uzumaki. I can guide you, train you, and make you stronger than ever before. I can teach you things and techniques the likes of which you have never seen. Slowly, Orochimaru's head moved to whisper at Naruto's ear. I will not command you, Naruto. I will not ask for your devotion or your blind obeisance. I will not force you, lie to you, or backstab you. I don't need to, because you already know, deep within your heart, that you cannot trust me, you cannot trust anyone. Orochimaru's smile became warm, as if it belonged on the face of a father proud for his son's accomplishments. You can only trust in yourself and your own beliefs, your own ideals. Am I right, Naruto? What if you are? Naruto croaked. What if I don't want to follow you? Then we will leave. Orochimaru replied, letting go of the boy's shoulders. Mind you, I'm sure everyone has a moment where they desire to be left in peace, alone, to think about what they want to do with their lives. It is normal. I did the same, but I was far more productive as I built a network of spies all around the elemental countries at the same time as I went on my thoughtful thinking spree. The Sannin held his smile up for a moment more. Then again, I can't expect you to be as smart as me now, can I? You'd just let me go? Naruto asked then incredulously. Yes, Orochimaru acquiesced. I don't really need you for my plans, Naruto. Whether you like it or not, you are merely a footnote in my master plan. Sure, you can become a wrench to my cogs, but that's only if you truly start being a bother, and you can't become a bother, because your very own presence would help me. So what is your plan then? He asked back, his eyes slightly narrowing as Orochimaru turned, giving him the shoulders. My plan, it's funny, really, Orochimaru chuckled. At first I thought that, if everyone was devoid of chakra, then the shinobi system would collapse. Then I realized it would simply mean that the era of samurai would come back. I followed Nagato's plan. You don't know him, do you? He asked, looking at Naruto's perplexed face. Never mind, I followed his for a while. His own is the creation of a super Baijuyu-powered weapon of mass destruction, that would make war a no-win scenario for everyone, but then I thought, what about scuffles? What about a single shinobi sent to assassinate another? Would you kill millions to get to one Avenger? He chuckled. Of course you wouldn't. You'd send 2, then they'd send 3, and then they would. Naruto's eyes snapped shut. When he opened them again, they were clear and cold. You spoke with a Baijuyu. Orochimaru's smile widened beyond proportions as he began to clap slowly. Very, very good, he said. You surprise me time and time again with your ability to state the obvious, Naruto Uzumaki. His golden eyes narrowed. Now that you know, let me ask, why did you refuse their suggestion? What chains and shackles tie you yet to this miserable world? What possible reason would you have, you who can now slaughter innocents without even batting an eyelid? It's not right to kill people, the weak retort stopped Orochimaru on the spot. What? It was rare for the Snake Sannin to be speechless, but in this case, he had to. I understand, killing for reasons, Naruto muttered. But if we kill only for the sake of killing, doesn't that make us monsters? You killed children in a village. I was ordered to. The blood stains the hands of the Hokage and the one who issued the order, not on mine, he retorted crisply. You held no mercy for the villagers attacked by Kumo shinobi. They saw my special techniques, I had no choice. They shouldn't have seen them. Are you really shifting each and every single blameful action you have committed upon others? Orochimaru whispered, are you really that broken, that you cannot realize your own faults? I'm not broken, Naruto snarled. I did what I had to do. he screamed then, stomping his foot on the ground as it cracked. I followed orders. I obeyed. I became the tool Konoha wanted. The only times I acted as myself, I made mistakes. The last one just sent me here. Look at me. Do you think I'm happy with this? It's cold out here, it's cold and there's no hope for me to return to. Yes, Orochimaru nodded. There is no hope. His right hand extended like a whip, grasping firmly at Naruto's neck and squeezing as it retracted back, bringing the boy closer to his face. Holding him up, Orochimaru snarled then. These were my words as well, a long time ago, Orochimaru smiled. You can never be at fault for atrocities others made you commit, right? Gah, arg. Breathing was difficult, as the hand squeezed tightly against Naruto's throat. I followed orders, my superior is to blame, Orochimaru mocked. But the dead remain dead all the same, he hissed. We will be heading somewhere special, he said then, dropping the boy on the ground. If your claim is as such, then I want to see it. I want to see the truth in your hypocrisy. His cloak flapped as he turned to look towards Itachi. Itachi, inform Nagato that we are leaving his organization. He unclasped the Akatsuki cloak and removed the ring from his finger. The truth is something hard to swallow sometimes, he remarked dryly towards Naruto, which is why I will force-feed it to you. You said I didn't have to follow you, Naruto coughed out, holding at his throat. Do you truly think you can go somewhere else? Orochimaru retorted. Sure, we can battle, and sure, you might be able to make more than enough chaos to get away from me, but I will keep on following you, and you'll have to keep on running. Or you can just follow me for a bit, find out the truth your heart desires and finally, if Kami wills it, understand that in the end the truth and your own truth are completely different things. Why the effort with me? Because, my dear Naruto, Orochimaru cooed. I see in you what Kushina Uzumaki never had, Minato Namikaze's cunningness. The smile grew feral. And simply because of that, I must guide you on the correct path. Then his smile dropped, and with a serious voice added. Do not worry. The truth I will let you see is impartial and completely lacks manipulation. The waterfall of truth is one of the hidden treasures of Kumigakure, located on a floating island to the north of here. Once you stand in front of it, the truth will become manifest. It might be ugly, or who knows, it might prove you right, but in the end it will simply be the truth. Orochimaru's neck elongated as it stilled to a halt mere inches from Naruto's face. Good or evil, I wonder, is there any truth that lies in the middle of gray? Naruto didn't answer, but slowly stood up and nodded. He knew how to choose his battles and this was one he didn't even think for an instant he could win. Still, he had to know. How? How did you find me? I have never stopped watching over you, Naruto, Orochimaru remarked with a small smile. In that moment, a perfectly spherical piece of glass emerged from his robes. Really, I stole this from Sarutobi-sensei the day I left Konoha. He chuckled. And nobody even realized it was missing all this time. Orochimaru hummed then. How stupid can someone be, to leave a perfectly functional peeping sphere around their office? These things have won wars in the past. The sphere disappeared into another one of the Snake Sunin's sleeves. And let me tell you, Naruto, Orochimaru added carefully, that trying to steal it will result in great body harm for yourself. He nodded sagely as he said that. You want one? Find yourself another. All right. Can we go, now? Itachi asked quietly, ignored up to that moment. Of course Itachi-kun. Here I was, forgetting about the guy who tries to kill me to no avail. Naruto's sweat dropped looking towards Itachi, who just stared back at him. See? I told you he'd follow us. Orochimaru added whistling a tune. Is he always? This is a good day, Itachi replied. On his bad ones, he makes an active effort to look mad. Naruto said nothing else. And so, they trudged on. Chapter 54, Make your choice, Savior or Destroyer. Orochimaru of the Sunin was tone-deaf. Although that statement still did not describe properly how bad of a singer he was, Naruto supposed that it would have to do for the situation at hand. He never knew how one could supposedly be a hostage and at the same time not, but apparently, he fitted the bill perfectly. He wasn't tied. If he wanted, he could run away with ease. The problem of course would be being captured right back again by the two S-ranked shinobi who were currently escorting him for lack of a better term towards some place that was supposed to tell him the truth. Naruto grumbled as he watched the snow slowly stop, the closer they went to the sea. They had completely ignored the cities and the villages of the Land of Frost, avoiding their few patrols and travelers. Leaving no trace of their passage, they made their way to the coast. "What exactly are you hoping to achieve?" he asked one night, eyeing the snake Sunin. "Oh, I'm glad you asked," Orochimaru remarked carefully. "I plan on exterminating every single living being in the entire world." He smiled brightly, as if he had just told a child he was going to an amusement park or somewhere fun. Naruto shuddered. He didn't dare to ask again. The trip gratefully ended after a few days of terse silence from Itaki and horrible singing from Orochimaru, as they finally reached the border of the Land of Frost with the sea. The waves hurling against the sandy beach, covered in a light sheen of ice, were a majestic spectacle to behold. Their clear azure colors refracted the light of the sun and the magnificent pure blue of the sky, which held no clouds no matter how far Naruto looked for them. Icebergs floated harmlessly further away near the horizon, and as Orochimaru opened up a scroll with quick movements of his long fingers, he began to hum contentedly to himself. The call, if such a thing he could call the strange pulling sensation that seemed to grip at his very being, was enticing and rhythmic, like the lullaby of a nursery song. He couldn't place it among the few songs he had ever heard, but whatever it was, it felt catchy. "Judging by my calculations," Orochimaru spoke then calmly, "the island should be in that direction." He thrust his arm forward, pointing between two icebergs. "We just need to make a trip of a few miles." "Are we going to swim?" Naruto asked, his gaze going from the clearly cold water to the far-off distance. "If you enjoy that sort of thing then yes, by all means do so. I will take a better mean of transport." The snake Sunin then bit his thumb, summoning forth a giant blue-skinned snake with picturesque depictions on its scales of the underwater floor. The snake could easily be as tall as a 3-floors building, at least judging by Naruto's eye. "This here is Croat. Say hello to Naruto-kun." "Hello," the giant snake replied with a soft voice, barely a whisper. Orochimaru rolled his golden eyes. He is incredibly shy with strangers, but he has the most powerful poison of the entire summoning contract, and is also one of the few means of transportation above water that I know of. With a hop, he jumped on the back of the snake. "Hello," Naruto replied nervously, eyeing the gigantic snake from head to tail with worry. "All aboard the snake train now," the Sunin remarked. "We can't miss our target after all." Then, Orochimaru flexed his legs as if expecting to surf atop the head of Croat. Itaka too, who was generally always at ease, held himself as if he was about to be flying away at any moment. Naruto wasn't stupid. He kneeled and held himself tightly with his hands to the skin of the summoned animal, letting his chakra stick him to the surface. The next few minutes proved him correct, as the snake nearly soared through the water with the same speed a Mato-gai would. Leaving behind a trail in the water, the wind slapping strongly on their faces, the snake's speed was beyond doubt inhuman. They passed by the middle of the two icebergs, heading towards the deepest waters and the horizon. Orochimaru spoke no words, or if he did, the wind dispersed them. Naruto's eyes peered through the salty air forward, his gaze slowly attracted to an island that was coming closer and closer. It looked as if two small hills had emerged from the seabed, and with time vegetation had covered them. "There is a barrier close by." Orochimaru's neck had extended to reach his ear. "Gah!" Naruto exclaimed, looking at the face of the Sunin mere inches in front of him. "What the hell?" "Calm yourself," Orochimaru's tone was pissed now. "This is nothing to be surprised about." The golden eyes of the snake Sunin peered through his own, before a smile blossomed on his lips. "We are going to keep the pressure off your back, Naruto-kun, so while we do that, you need to head for the Waterfall of Truth. It's right at the center of the island, you can't miss it." Orochimaru licked his lips. "Try to act as quietly as you can, all right." His neck snapped back, returning to his body at the head of the snake. Naruto closed his eyes and grimaced. The snake suddenly curled in the water, before snapping up and jumping out of the water. It sailed through the air with its fangs bared, before landing its jaws against the neck of the island. Naruto jumped out of instinct, his hands grabbing on the branch of a tree on the biggest hill of the thing just as both Orochimaru and Itachi dashed ahead in the direction of the thing's head. He widened his eyes as realization dawned on him that the thing was not a simple volcanic island created when an underwater volcano erupted. It was an old and still living giant tortoise. The ground trembled as screams echoed from the mouth of the turtle, while explosions and the noises of techniques echoed further away from his position. Naruto laid low on the ground, closing his eyes and letting the noises filter through as he waited for his moment. He felt the ground tremble, heard the frantic calls of shinobi through their radios. Call reinforcements. There are 2's rank. We have to. We must evacuate. Warn Raikage-sama. He charged then, his soul snarling at him, longing for something that was deeper and deeper into the forest on the back of the living beast. The trees parted to reveal a meadow, where water was gushing down from a waterfall that held no visible point of recharge. His heart felt as if daggers were piercing through it, his stomach burned and his breathing grew ragged as he took another step forth. Naruto gagged. He gasped and coughed, his flesh pulsing and trembling as he could swear he could hear the blood rushing from his ears. The waters of the waterfall began to boil. He fell down on one knee. He should have used the opportunity to run away, not to follow through with Orochimaru's orders. Now, what else was there to do but get through it? Naruto wobbled back up, grounding his teeth and snarling. He wasn't some weak-willed bastard who'd tremble and die from some sort of unknown sickness. He was Naruto Uzumaki, and he was destined for greatness. Those are bold words, a tight voice spoke crisply, as a figure emerged from the waters of the waterfall. Spiked blonde hair, a long white trench coat, a necklace of beads, holding on to a staff with a sword strapped to his mind short-circuited. To be destined is seldom to be happy, the figure remarked as he took careful steps forward. To be prophesized is rarely to be blessed, the deep purple rings that surrounded the man's eyes shone slightly. To be different is rarely a gift, and more of a curse. With those words, the sage of the six paths stood in front of Naruto Uzumaki, and then he sat down on a nearby chair, that appeared out of nowhere. Naruto blinked. It's been a while since I sat down on something, the sage said with a small smile gracing his lips, while stretching his back and yawning slightly. Ohi, Naruto said. No long-winded philosophical discussion. Don't feel like it, the sage retorted shrugging. Frankly? You don't need one, kid. There was a sloshing sound, and a bottle of sake found its way in the sage's hands. You're drinking sake? Naruto asked out. He looked around once more, trying to take in the ever-changing surroundings. This wasn't some sort of strange genjutsu, was it? Something extremely fishy and strange meant to lower his guard and... Calm down, kiddo. The sage said suddenly, waving his arms. Just relax and take it easy, all right? You've done your job well enough, you'll return to it eventually, so just take 5, if you know what I mean. You are the sage of the six paths? Naruto asked in a slow, questionable voice. You? Yes, the sage nodded back. You see the eyes? Back in my times, they got me all the ladies I could wish for. You are the one who brought chakra to the shinobi, Naruto continued, the one who founded the shinobi system, who trapped the 10 tails inside of his body and became the first Jinhiriki. Yes again, he replied. You then split him in 9, and formed the 9 Baijuyua. And once more, correct, the sage clapped heartedly. Want a prize? No serious philosophical lines? No, repent, see the truth, stuff now? Really? Naruto's eyes were wide in disbelief. Ah, yes, I suppose being this place the waterfall of truth, I should give you some sort of encouragement, right? The sage made a small smile with his lips, before closing his eyes and bringing both hands behind his head. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, he added in a murmured voice. Everyone has their own belief of right and wrong. Live with whatever rocks your boat, as long as it lets you sleep at night, it's the right way. Naruto chuckled as he slumped down on the water. Only that? Really? You seem so surprised, the sage remarked. Normally I admit the waterfall would show you your dark self, but apparently you sealed it away together with Kurama." The man shook his head with a hint of grief visible for an instant over his features. "It seems the faults of the fathers will always befall their children." "Right." Naruto's hands clapped together. "Explain it," he said with a light growl. "Tell me, what was Kurama trying to say? What's going to happen in a year?" "You are," the sage answered quietly, "although that is still up to debate." "I am," Naruto parroted. "But, me?" Orochimaru was right. "And wrong at the same time," the sage replied. "There are actually two more who can fit the criteria. Then again, depending on how you squint your eyes, there can also be thousands. One taught by the Toad Sage could very well be Sai instead of you, or also a reader who tries a new sexual position after reading Ika Ika Learn to Please." Naruto's right hand went to his forehead, as he closed his eyes for a moment. "I just didn't hear the Sage of the Six Paths say that." "Why not?" In my times there was only the missionary position, and after a while it was boring too." "I don't want to discuss your sex life," Naruto yelled with his eyes wide. "I want to know what I'm supposed to do to make things right." "That's up to you," the sage retorted with a light chuckle. "You could return to Konoha, get a slap on the wrist because you're too important to kill or punish, and then wait and see how the world reacts." There was a heavy sigh. "You could go to Awagakure, accept the offer of the Tsuchikage and turn the tables on him," the sage suggested. "You could go to Kumo, to Suna, you could even keep on following Orochimaru. Who do you think I am, your nanny? You are the one who has to choose. No glass can be broken, if no hand wields the stone." "Do what you want," Naruto grumbled. "You're not going to try and tell me that. Why should I tell you where you are wrong? You chose that wrongness, thus you made it true. Some people enjoy living in a lie all their life. Would you consider it wrong to feast on human flesh? Nevertheless, some summonses do that. Would you feed on the dreams of children? Some summoned creatures do that too. In the end, what purpose does it serve to be right or wrong? It matters what you do, not how you do it. I killed children, wives, elderly. And their faces and their screams will forever remain inside your head, forming scars that will never heal. There is no magic sponge that makes everything better, no forgetful potion to erase the guilt your soul can feel, but just like it is easy to forgive oneself, so too it must be easy to forgive others, right? Forgiveness. To forgive, to love, to accept. The shinobi world is filled with hatred, revenge, evil, but that doesn't mean it can't be changed. There are many who live respectable lives, who found their place, their reality. Evil cannot always be forgotten, but it can be forgiven. So I should forgive? Orochimaru, I know your heart claims for his blood, after all his were the underlings that killed your sensei, but, will that change anything? Even if it did, even if it didn't, the past will always remain unchanged. Ah, here is the philosophical discussion, Naruto sighed. I was waiting for this. You're the one who's asking me questions. Is it a bit too ingrained in you to follow orders, perhaps? A good shinobi does not ask, he obeys, Naruto quoted. I never said that, the sage grumbled. I made a simple rule. You'd have to wonder how they managed to change it into something else. I mean, I told them all to have a good heart. And what do? They get the entire use of chakra and turn it into a killing business. Where did I go wrong? I should have written on a mountain, no killing with chakra, but even then, I'm sure some imbecile would have erased the no dot. How am I talking to you? Naruto asked then, eyeing the sake bottle that never seemed to empty no matter the amount of swings the sage gave it. Chakra lingers, the sage remarked. Powerful chakra lingers strongly. Ghosts are nothing more than a byproduct of too much chakra left to impress upon a specific location. The man rolled his circled purple eyes. I left some impressed into my favorite summon, waiting for the sheer chance one would come forward wielding more than a single Baijuya within them. I needed to warn them, after all. You're doing a fine job making no sense whatsoever, Naruto deadpanned. I expected fire, thunder, you're the sage of the six paths, you're practically a venerated god. Why the hell did you just pop out from nowhere with a sake bottle in hand? Does it matter the form the message is delivered, as long as it is delivered? The sage retorted, and I thought it would look cool, to be a. What was that? Nothing, the sage looked actually flustered, it's only a slip of the tongue, nothing more. That sounded. Listen here and listen well, the sage growled. The 10 tails must not be reformed. There are 2 ways to prevent that, one that is the easy way, and one that is the most difficult one. Of both, you are the one who has to choose. So you are going to tell me what those ways are. You already know of them, the sage retorted. Either you will bring forth the salvation of the world, or you will bring forth its destruction. You will become either the demon the world needs, or its hero. Let me tell you that at present, you're doing a great job at being a demon. Naruto closed his eyes, bringing his fingers to massage his temples. Let's say I believe those are the only 2 ways. Why are they the only 2 ways? As long as people live, they feel. It might seem nothing, but love, sadness, happiness, or anger, they all leave something in the world. Chakra is the energy that comes from within, from our very soul. It can be yin or yang, it can be positive or negative, but it leaves our body naturally with time and merges with the senjutsu chakra. The sage brought his hands together, before tapping his index fingers together and then separating them, forming a circle in the air. As long as there is a balance, then everything is fine. As long as some people love, others can grieve. If someone hates, another can laugh. Balance is extremely difficult to achieve, however, since you can either increase the minor part of the 2 or you can squash down the greater part. The circle of light blue chakra filled half with white and half with black, forming the yin-yang symbol. However, those amounts left in the earth were nothing more than mere specks. It was when I unlocked the secrets to using chakra, that things took a turn for the worse. Here the sage grimaced. The amount simply increased, and balance was broken. It shattered apart, the black side began to engulf the white in the chakra circle floating in the air. To have a good heart, to offset the evil, that was capricious of me to think. There cannot be good without evil, or evil without good. A world made solely of light is unable to exist. A world only of darkness is doomed to wither and die. His eyes locked with Naruto's. Balance must be achieved. What, do you think, is alive? The sage asked then. What do you define as living? Does a rock live? Does a snake? Does a tree? Anything that can change, then lives. Be it a corpse rotting beneath the sun, or a mountain peak slowly eroding to water. As long as there is change, then there is life. The yin and yang began to spin slowly. Peace left the place to war, and war to peace, he continued. But anger, hatred, revenge, those feelings never left. Is the earth alive to begin with, Naruto? Are we nothing but parasites in the end? So, the 10 tails, the Jubi, he's a good guy. Disbelief laced Naruto's question, as he stared wide-eyed at the sage's completely serious face. That is the crux of the matter, the sage acquiesced. With chakra used for evil purposes, the Jubi came to be to remove it. Like a father, he punished the unruly children with overwhelming strength and severity. Like a monster, he showed no mercy. And then you sealed it away, Naruto added. So that he couldn't complete his purpose. Indeed, and when my time came to an end, after I preached long and wide about the dangers of using chakra wrongly, I was met with a choice on who to name my heir. The Senju and the Uchiha ancestors, right? I chose the youngest one, he sighed. Thinking back on it, I should have chosen someone else entirely. Why is it that brothers always have to fight? I loved them both dearly, and they turned that love into a competition, that competition into hatred, and that hatred became the foundation of the shinobi arts to kill. He shook his head softly. If I could spin back the hourglass of time, I'd turn their asses red from slaps. Naruto nearly choked at the mental image. Why did you split the Jubi apart? Because he was too powerful, the sage replied. He wasn't simply strong, or filled with chakra. He was powerful. You know what it means, to face overwhelming odds? To literally be in the presence of a god that you have to fight without escape? I could have probably lived for hundreds of years, but my life shortened by merely holding that beast within. I had no choice in the end, I split him into 9 pieces and taught each of them to have faith, and wait for the day where they would finally find peace. The sage's face slowly showed a small smile. I dreamed of a place with no hatred, with no death, no misery, no violence, a place where no evil can grow and fester uncontrolled and unchecked, and that was how I dreamed of 2 earths, rather than one. One was of charred ground and another of peace. Naruto muttered back. Nice dreams you have. You picking up a fight? The sage snarled. I'd like to see you find another way. Naruto shook his head, before carefully opening his hand. So, this is all there is. Yes, the sage acquiesced. But problems cannot be ignored, Naruto, he grimaced. The more a problem is ignored, the more it will fester and grow, until it will inevitably reach a proportion beyond salvation. So, what you're saying is that there's no magical aid. Exactly, the sage chuckled. Facing one's problems, accepting one's actions, acknowledging one's weakness, is the way forward. Naruto's heart clenched painfully. He hissed, as he felt a wave of hot air pressurize down on his neck. Arg! He moaned, as his head thrummed and his ears ringed. What is? The sage's hands went to his shoulders, firmly clasping on them as his eyes narrowed on Naruto's. There are paths that one must travel, before he may claim to know the world. There are things that one must acknowledge, before he can claim to know. There might be a third way, beyond destruction, or forced peace, but I do not know of it. Balance must last, for there is no hope beyond the end of the year for you all. I'm the one who has to save the world then. As I told you before. I'm not going to believe a wanker is the prophesized one no matter the way you put it, old man, Naruto grumbled. Who are you calling an old man? The sage retorted hotly, a nervous tick mark on his forehead. I'll let you know I'm in the prime of my youth. Still old, Naruto retorted. A twinge of pain sliced his heart. I better leave. When you meet Jayaki, tell him. The sage smiled warmly. Tell him that violence never solved anything. The world around Naruto shattered then, and with a heavy gasp of air, he felt his entire body flung backwards as the waterfall exploded. His hands came up, shielding him with sand that rose from the ground to protect him as jagged rocks slammed against the impromptu mass of gravel. The water drained quickly in the pond, leaving behind nothing but a mudded hole. Beyond the waterfall was now visible a cave, where the lullaby called to him even stronger than before. Yet, abruptly, the song ceased. The ground cracked as the trees splintered. A scream describable only as that of a mournful spirit ruptured the very air. Fissures spread on the soil, crimson mist sprayed out, coloring of red the grass and the trees. The stench of rot filled the winds, and Naruto couldn't help but slam his right foot on the ground to jump high above it all, to try and understand what the devastation was about. His answer came from his very soul, as the Nibi whispered with a quiet voice. Once a summon has finished its task, it will unsummon. Naruto's hands went through the hand seals for a summoning, before he bit down on his thumb to call forth a bird to hold him in the air. A giant vulture but not Hajiwashi answered the call, and as he gracefully landed on its back, he eyed the devastation wrought upon the island. The giant tortoise was screaming in pain, as centuries of rocks, tree roots, and branches broke away from its shell. It couldn't unsummon however, for some reason Naruto didn't understand. She tried hard to remain among the living, defying even death, the Nibi whispered. Now, wounded and poisoned, without enough chakra to return home, I suppose it's just fitting for someone to end her suffering, rather than let her die by the hand of venom upon a foreign land. Naruto's hand went to the handle of the butcher's cleaver. He held it sideways, giving a light tap to the vulture's back who understood his intention. Wind chakra formed on the sides of the cleaver, so strongly that a gale began to blow upon the waters. The vulture caught before plummeting down, flapping its powerful wings to increase its speed. The whistling noise of the wind grew louder and louder, as Naruto clenched his teeth and held his tongue steady. Was it merciful, to kill someone in pain? His hands stopped trembling from the pressure of the descent. Chakra flared briefly to increase the length of the butcher's sword, and then Naruto jumped down from the back of the bird, silent as if the action itself wasn't suicidal to begin with. Time seemed to slow as he poured all the chakra he could muster through the blade as he brought it down. The death would be quick, painless. It actually didn't matter that Croat was in the way. He'd unsummon probably. In a single instant in which there was nothing but silence filling his head, Naruto felt at ease. This was his nature. He was a weapon, deadly, lethal, and powerful. His power went beyond the mere knowledge of techniques or the amount of chakra. In that single instant of pure adrenaline, his heart drummed strongly and a smile formed on his face. Then the cleaver came down. Blood sprayed for a single instant, tinging the waters of the ocean in crimson puddles. An enormous explosion of smoke rocked next, pushing away Naruto from the water's surface. The vulture grabbed his back with the tip of its beak, pulling him back on his shoulders between its wings. Naruto gasped for air, staring at the devastation brought by his attack, as his throat twitched in desperate need to let something escape. A dry chuckle emerged from his lips. The boy shook his head in disbelief. Really, he chuckled, bringing his right hand to cover his face. What a mess. Where to, summoner? The vulture asked. To that question, Naruto now knew the answer very well. Iwagakur, he remarked. Never trade an unknown threat for one you know of, he added in a meek whisper. There was really no need to stick around for either Orochimaru or Itachi. Orochimaru hadn't forced him to follow him, and the meeting with the sage had actually yielded some interesting and insightful answers to the problem at hand. He wondered, his gaze settling on the clouds that streaked by in the sky while his arms crossed in front of his chest, if freedom was peace. People generally considered clouds peaceful, and they were free. Yet at the same time, wind enslaved them to his will. Sheep lived in ignorance, guided by their shepherds, but they were peaceful. A form of law always had to exist, when society came to be. Wasn't that just the final proof that humanity could not rule itself? Given chakra, they had devolved to brutally. Without it, they still fought with steel and tore apart countries. He shook his head, letting the wind ruffle through his hair. A wasteland of sand or a meadow of silence, he mumbled. There has to be a third way. He stared at the black wings of his summon. If you call bonds shackles, then you enslave. If you call shackles bonds, then you bring together people. It's all a matter of perspective, after all, he chuckled again, taking one last steadying breath. I'm getting married, I suppose. May Terumi. I told the Raikage we have nothing to do with it. She hissed. Zabuza is dead, we burned his corpse and someone took his sword. Candles softly lighted the office of the Mizukage, as a thick woolly carpet occupied much of the floor. There was a desk, a few cerulean-tinted windows and a few armchairs. A fire crackled in the nearby fire pit, casting lights and shadows over the face of the Kumigakure ambassador. But what if he isn't dead? The white-haired man was getting on her nerves. His name was Amwa, and he was there either to suck Kirigakure dry or to force a war against them with a casus belli. There are no what-ifs. She nearly shrieked, instead opting for a light hiss. Someone is trying to pin the blame on Kirigakure. An entire squad of Kumigakure shinobi blames your demon of the hidden mist, Mizukage, Amwa retorted dryly. One might be a traitor, but all of them. Maybe they all need glasses, May retorted. Listen, Ambassador, we do not have the sword. We are looking for it as we speak. You think we would lie about having lost it? Why not? You could lie about having it to avoid looking weak, or you could lie about not having it to keep the demon hidden and use him, Amwa said, and what if it's all a ploy within a ploy, and in truth you are actually protecting a secret by not protecting it and thus you really don't have the sword? Yes. We don't have the sword. But because you said you don't have the sword, what if you do have the sword? May closed her eyes and took a deep, sharp breath. Ayo, show the ambassador the door to his rooms. We'll talk with him more tomorrow. Follow me, Ayo said then crisply, entering from the door and stepping right next to Amwa who made a dry tisk sound. Raikage-sama told me to stay only one day, Amwa said briskly, his gaze moving from Ayo to the Mizukage. If you do not wish to admit your fault in the matter, then I will leave today. No doubt tomorrow there will be a fleet from the north, May hissed. You already have some men prepared, haven't you? We can no longer remain blind to this threat, Amwa said, his eyes flicking towards the windows. There will be no need for any explosive escapes, May stated, a small smile settling on her plump lips. You are free to go then, and while you are at it do inform your Raikage that if it was a war he asked, then a war he will receive." With those words said, Ao escorted Amwa out of the office of the Mizukage, where Kiragakurumbu would then finish guiding him outside the village. Mei stood up then, as the door closed, and turned to watch the village from the window. The entire structure was new, just like much of the village. There were barely a few buildings that had survived the onslaught of the Three Tails, and of those, she ordered many brought down to be on the safe side. She disliked acting rashly. Too many times people around her called her hot-blooded because of that, as if they were funny, making a pun on her bloodline ability. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. Within the end of the day, the village would know of war looming over the horizon. Within the end of the week, the first casualties would trickle in with ink and paper reports. Within the end of the month, the other nations would know. Within the end of the year, she'd be either standing on the ruined ashes of Kyumigakur, or with her legs open and popping out babies for the Raikage and his ilk. She bit on her lips furiously. She'd rather die than become a breeding cow for Kyumo. Mei's hand went to the lock of hair that covered half of her face, and slowly, she removed it to stare at her reflection in the mirror. Scars covered that side of her face, scars and burn marks. The fight against the previous Mizukage had not been without its price, and her body had been one of the things that went first. Still, she had gladly paid the price for the power she now had. She was the Mizukage, and she, alone, decided the lives of those within Kiri. "Bring in that representative of Gato Industries," she remarked then, apparently to no one. "He and I will have a chat face-to-face about some troubling events. A deal with the devil more, one less, what difference did it make?" Isabu. Everything was his. Everything belonged to him. Everyone was his toy, his object of desire, his possession whether they knew it or not, they all were his in the end. Closed away from the rest of the world, he slept within his own shell. Everything was his, the ground, the water, the air. It all belonged to him. The sin of greed fed him, and the more he wanted the more he had, the more he had the better he was the more he could obtain. The bar of greed never lowered, but always increased. If someone had 100, they desired 200, then 400, then tens of hundreds. If someone was happy and their neighbor was happier, they desired their happiness, their wealth, and their possessions. The ugly wife changed for the beautiful one. The money in the household increased for no other reason but greed and desire for more. He felt all that as he rested, and suddenly, he felt more. His tails swished back and forth. They trembled, as his body racked with spasms. It was coming. He could feel it deep within his very essence. The time of war, the time where misery, death, greed, revenge, arrogance, disgust, ignorance, violence, and malice ruled the world and the minds of humans would come once more. Blood would pour on the ground, screams would reach upon the very foundations of heaven itself. He would be there, to watch it all fall. He heard the desires, he felt their greed, and in the end, he knew where he had to go. "I am coming," he spoke in the depths of the sea, his left eye shining as it opened. "Brothers, sisters," he said, "I will lend my aid." His hands gripped tightly on the seabed, lifting clouds of sand as he flexed his fingers and arms. The next moment, he pushed himself away from the bottom of the sea with a single powerful push. He rose through the water quickly, spinning around as fast as he could. He emerged from the water with a bellowing roar, as corals formed to cover the sea's surface. He landed atop a platform of them, crunching a few beneath his weight and firmly gripping on his impromptu raft. Isabu flexed his muscles again, and once more, he jumped. He'd have to hurry, he didn't want to miss his cue, after all. Karen. Konoha was a village of imbeciles. If the spandex-clad man assigned to be her escort wasn't enough to prove it, then there was the stupid tanned girl who was also a jinhiriki, and who was on permanent patrol duty around Konoha. She was there too to begin with, but this and that and, oh well, can't help it, made it all the more understandable. She bit her lips, letting the pleasurable sensation wash over her mouth as blood trickled on her tongue. There was nothing for miles around them, except Konoha ninjas, yet since the return from the land of iron security had tripled. Karen-chan. Have your youthful flames found anything? She shook her head. No, she replied. Nothing. There are only Konoha shinobi as far as I can see. If someone had told her she'd be working for Konoha in the end, she'd have laughed at them, butchered them into tiny pieces of flesh and then raped their corpse cold with barbed wire, before setting the person in question on fire for daring to even joke about it. She could manage that without actually killing them completely. The special qualities of her blood always managed to surprise her somehow. Yet in the end, here she was, working for Konoha. Ah. I see. Yosh! Guy exclaimed once more, fist pumping in the air. Then we will move to the south gate. If we cannot reach it in 5 minutes, then I will make 5 laps around Konoha. Oh. Oh. A game. Fu yelled back, clapping her hands excitedly. Let's play. Let's play. Karen narrowed her eyes, and then tapped gently on the bulge that was below her stomach. Ahem, pregnant kunoichi here, she bitterly muttered. No running. Chapter 55, Dealing with People. Iwagakure's air smelled like ashes and molten metal. The incessant drumming of machines from the very mountains was everywhere around the shinobi village. One of the reasons all Iwagakure shinobi learned their namesake technique, to hide in the rock, after all, was to manage to sleep in peace and quiet, without being disturbed. Across the gates, the Iwagakure special forces were currently trying their best to appear calm. In reality, they were outright going through every single known alert code they knew or had even a remote inkling of to get as much attention as possible on the southern gate. That was because at the gate in question, was a visitor. Differently from Konoha, that was hidden in the forest but easily accessible, or Kirigakure that was on an island and guarded by fearsome fog banks and jagged underwater reefs, Iwagakure's location was secret. It was the type of secret not even Iwagakure Missing Nin could reveal, because the entrance itself changed every time. A set of tunnels interchanged with one another before leading to the empty chimney of the dormant volcano upon which rested the village hidden in the rocks. That was on the good days, of course. On the bad days, the tunnels led to active magma pits actively patrolled by Iwagakure Hyjounin, or in the middle of dangerous traps made to maim and kill the assaulters. Konoha had its seals, but Iwagakure had the strength of nature herself on its side. There were not only jagged cliffs and tall mountains separating Iwagakure shinobi from the main trafficked roads, but also narrow rivers and a set of maze-like bridges to boot. The visitor did attract attention, not only for his shoulder-length blonde hair which ended in spikes of black or for the giant butcher cleaver strapped to his back, but also because he had no forehead protector, yet wore a Chiryunin flak jacket. The cerulean eyes seemed icily cold as they scanned the gate guards, but the Iwagakure shinobi weren't trained to simply shudder because of a piercing glare. So, when is the Tsuchikage coming down here? Naruto asked calmly. He will be here when he decides to be, shinobi, the gate guard snarled back. So, before the end of the day? How do you get light down here anyway? I'd think in the middle of a volcano there'd be a darker atmosphere. That is an Iwagakure secret, the guard replied, gritting his teeth. We use mirrors, brat. The Tsuchikage appeared in a flicker, lifting a light sheen of dust as he landed. Ah! I knew my hopes were well placed. The old man snickered as he rubbed his hands together, sporting a small smile. Unaki of Iwa's smile was anything but nice. It was a mixture of a snake having caught its prey and a ferocious wolf readying the mortal blow upon a deer, but Naruto returned it with one of his own. How could I refuse? It took me some time, but I did manage to reach here. His answer met with a gruff, strangled voice from a nearby guard. To them it was probably preposterous to talk so casually with their Tsuchikage. How did you get past the tunnels, brat? Unaki asked then, his eyes narrowing slightly. I didn't, I just carved my way through in a linear line. Holding a grin, Naruto produced a raise-non in his right hand. Surely, you can do the same now. Few of ours can, the Tsuchikage acquiesced, but we'll have it learned in due time. Unaki turned to the guards and the assembled jounin who had actually answered the call because of a visitor at the gate. Listen up, brats. This here is an esteemed guest of the Tsuchikage, the son of the Yondaime. Gasps and glares echoed in the assembled shinobi force, and a Nukenin of Konoha. Before anyone thinks about backstabbing him or poisoning his tea, think what would taste sweeter, the death of the Yellow Flash's only son, or him swapping sides. And if your answer is still the first, then know that if you even try, I will not have mercy upon you, or your families. That quieted down much of the assembled ninjas, who still kept their gazes of diffidence up, or simply faked their hostility disappearing well enough. "Follow me," the Tsuchikage commented, flickering on the nearby rooftop. Naruto followed him, his feet landing on the hard stone before dashing forward, standing to the side of Unaki. "So, why did you choose Uegakuer in the end?" the old man asked, his voice neutral and controlled. "You want to use me, I want to use you," Naruto deadpanned. "I'm not one for circling around the issue, Tsuchikage-sama." "Enough with the empty words and gestures then," Unaki grumbled, "call me Jiji from now on, nephew." "Unaki Jiji." Naruto brought up an eyebrow, "You're actually sentimental about these things." "Kuratsuki is my only granddaughter," the man replied. "I might have the will of the stone to sacrifice her for a just cause, but that doesn't mean I can't wish for her happiness in the end." There was half a threat in those words, one Naruto picked up easily. "Of course I'll make her happy, within the limits of reason." "Very well," Unaki jumped over one last rooftop, before landing on the roof of the Tsuchikage's tower. The construction looked like a giant castle, with the top cylindrical and with small windows, difficult to access and completely different from the layout of the Hokage's tower. Smaller towers popped up from its sides, giving it the appearance of a tree upon which mushrooms had grown from its sides. It was then that Naruto gave a full look around the village. The buildings were all cylindrical, carved out of the rocks themselves. A bit in the distance, water rushed down in streams from crevices and cracks in the walls. There were few trees, sparse and in between, all covered in a light sheen of fog and dust. If not for the colored tops of the buildings themselves, he would probably never have seen the rooftops to begin with. "We should discuss business," Unaki affirmed as he opened a hatch on the roof, before jumping down. Naruto followed, closing the hatch behind him and landing in a softly lit room, where a deep crimson carpet laid across the floor. There were sculptures on the left side of the office, which accurately portrayed the Tsuchikage both of the past and of the present. "You were taller when they made your statue," Naruto deadpanned, staring at a muscle-bound giant rendition of Unaki which screamed fake over 1,000 times over to his senses. "I was young and reckless," Unaki acquiesced, a smile on his lips. "And a bit high-strung on getting it to emphasize my good points," he chuckled. "I scared the sculpture so much he had a heart attack by the time the statue was finished." Naruto nodded, his eyes then settling on the Tsuchikage's now sitting form at his desk. "Judging by how you came here alone, and with that sword on your back, I can reasonably understand what is going on," Unaki said with a feral smile. "You faked your death, grabbed that sword, and went on a nice killing spree over the border of Kumo and Kiri to start a war. Then, under orders from the Hokage, you came here alone to later prove that all along you've been working for IWA. In that way, you'd get Kiri and Kumo's weakened forces to pass through Konoha to reach IWA." The Tsuchikage's eyes shone darkly. "Then, with 3 battling and weakened countries, Konoha would be able to completely assimilate them." Naruto blinked. He took a step back. He didn't like that tone at all. "Of course, this is only my supposition, a supposition stemming from being an extremely paranoid, old and cranky third Tsuchikage. Furthermore, I wouldn't have publicly announced you as a turncoat of Konoha for no reason too, if I didn't have my own share of earning to get from this." The Tsuchikage gave a dry and sly gaze towards Naruto. "You mean, grandsons?" "Yes, but that alone could easily be obtained by knocking you out cold, getting what Uegakuer needs and then slicing your neck. Of course we'd have to deal with the Kyuubi afterwards, but I have no doubt we could still seal it away," Unaki shrugged. "No, there is a reason I'm dealing with you, one far more simple and easy to understand." "Ah, now I get it," Naruto retorted, nodding sagely. "You don't know if I can slip through your grasp or not, right?" "In part," the third Tsuchikage grumbled. "That slippery technique of your father killed many, and I will forever curse the day he created it, but that is not still enough to warrant aiding you whether you're a spy or not, and whether you're worthy of it or not. So there's more I can do for you, like aiding you take the Land of the Moon." "Precisely, kid," Unaki smiled, "the Land of the Moon is rich, filled with casinos and entertainment industries of various kinds." His old fingers tapped on the desk. "Many legal, many more illegal everywhere but that alone would not be sufficient still. I can still try my hand and get it without dirtying myself too much. No, there is still one more thing you being on my side entails. And what exactly is it, then? Naruto's eyes narrowed, as the Tsuchikage quietly unclasped a scroll. It discredits Konoha. It discredits Konoha extremely. He stood up, letting his cage robes flap loosely. The son of the Yondaime, who was the most powerful shinobi of the Land of Fire, the Kyuubi hierarchy, a Numbu, and personal guard of the Hokage, changing sides, like this? Without an alliance in place, whether you're a plant or not, your mere presence here gives me enough to take away more than half the business of Konoha. His eyes glinted. You'll suffocate Konoha economically, Naruto mumbled, his right hand up to his chin, his eyes closed. And even if I'm a plant, you'll press me as much as you can before I give. Within reason, of course, Unaki said, bringing up his hands. I need grandsons after all, and you said it yourself, with your use and be used. You want to use IWA as a shield against your actions as a missing ninja? I want to use you until you nearly drop dead from exhaustion. We'll have to make conditions, however, Naruto began. I do have the interest of becoming the next Tsuchikage. You do? Unaki's eyes widened for a brief second. Either you're the gutsiest plant I have ever seen, or you really did not think of using Iwagakure as a shield for your actions to let Konoha save face, he exhaled, shaking his head slowly. Very well, but in exchange I want Konoha's security details. I don't have them. I ranked as a Takubutsu Jounin after my period in Umbu training ended. They never saw fit of giving them to me. He turned thoughtful. I can give you something else, however, but for that I have more conditions. Oh? And what is it that you'd sell for even more conditions? The hiration? Did your father actually leave a written record? Naruto smiled. That's my insurance. I'd think the entire village of Konoha knowing how to use said technique would be pretty devastating, don't you think? And you wouldn't give it to them all while you're still alive because of the potential for abuse, but as a deterrent, I admit I'm intrigued. Summoning charged to hold the scroll, I suppose, Unaki grumbled. Well brat, at least you have a decent head for contingencies, the Tsuchikage sighed. Not that I was planning on doing anything with a strong arm. You are probably one of the Fujin hierarchy that remains in the grasp of a village. Whoever holds you can easily topple the situation around the world. Grumbling, he moved to get his pipe. So, what's your deal? I reserve the right to retreat on missions involving Konoha shinobi I personally know, he began softly. Wait. You're not against doing missions against Konoha. Konoha is just a village, he retorted. It never was home. Just a mass of buildings, a mass of people, a mass of individuals who go about their daily lives. Unaki turned thoughtful. Go on then, I'm listening. I'll fight your missions, but I want a mask and a code name for it. Let Konoha know I'm on your side, but let me fight anonymously. If they know where I am, they'd prepare countermeasures or try to take you in, while if I don't reveal you publicly in battle, they can still cling to us lying to bolster our strengths. Unaki actually nodded emphatically. That's a reasoning I can go behind. Naruto swallowed. And that is pretty much all there is. You can treat me like you would any other shinobi of Iwagakure. That's a pretty tall order. So, what do you have? I know the Kage Bunshin technique, but of course I'm without the scroll for it, he smiled. I'll have to teach it to someone, and considering its chakra requirements, I say I could teach it to my son or daughter when they come of age. Unaki smiled. He smiled and chuckled then with glee. Ah. It really is a pleasure doing business with you, Naruto Namikaze. Very well, I accept your terms. From the desk, Unaki took out an Iwagakure headband and a Jounin flak jacket. And to prove to me your trust, as well as getting you acquainted with the village. Here the Tsuchikage's smile turned feral once more. I'll hand you over a team of genin. Better to start learning about responsibilities early on, right? And genin don't have techniques I could steal or learn given time, Naruto deadpanned back. And since I'd have to protect them, I wouldn't be able to slip away unnoticed during the missions, which would be deranks within the village for at least a few months. Glad to see you've got a brain behind your mouth, Unaki moved, to stare out of the window. I know it might seem sudden, or hypocrite of me to say this, but you know, in another life, in another time, your father and I would probably have been friends, he chuckled quietly. He had the same eyes as you and I do. What type of eyes? Naruto asked, loosening his Konoha headband to replace it with the Iwagakure one. Cold, uncaring, yet fueled by something beyond mere anger or resentment. The eyes of a determined person shine through the darkest of nights, you know? It's those types of eyes that belong to people who simply won't die without putting up a fight. Unaki smiled, those are good eyes to have. Careful not to let them become dirty. Unaki crossed both hands behind his back and walked to stand to his side. Let us walk now, I'll show you around the town properly. Naruto nodded and quietly, he followed. There was much to see in little time, as he soon found out. Iwagakure had a ground level riddled with fissures and deep rivers that multiple bridges crossed. On that bridge I fought Uchiha Madara himself, Unaki said, his gaze lingering over a particular red-painted bridge with a small shrine at its end. It is where I and the second Tsuchikage battled him anyway, and he wiped the floor with us both, he chuckled. He was a downright bastard. Unaki spat to the side, before grumbling and taking a deep breath. He began to levitate a moment after. Trouble of getting old, he explained, is that you end up with your bones cranky before long. Once I used to run around this village, now I can barely take a few steps. Are you trying to fake weakness? Naruto asked calmly, raising an eyebrow. It fails completely. I know you aren't weak, Tsuchikage-sama. I said to cut it with the honorifics, Unaki smiled. Very well, the market's a bit bare at present, what with the tensions high and the road's condition. He gestured to a variety of stalls filled with all sorts of things. Ranging from penchants and medals to steel kunao and armors, it had an impressive display for being bare. We supply the majority of weapons and armors the land of iron needs, he puffed his chest up. And many more villages and suppliers come to us for the quality of our steel. Even Konoha, begrudgingly, prefers Iwagakure's steel to that of other countries. The smirk turned feral, our blades can cut through anything. And your shields can block anything. Naruto continued, knowing where this would go. Then, what if they both meet? Unaki added with a gleeful chuckle. Ah. I knew you would have known one of the oldest tricks in the book. So, what is the answer you gave? The one who strikes better, who position himself better, who is better, that is the one who survives, Naruto retorted. That was my first answer, but my teacher corrected me on that. So what did he answer? If you give the enemy the time to take out his shield, then you're a failure of a shinobi and should go back to the academy, Naruto quipped. He was very incensed on having the right mentality for the right mission. Was he a member of the special forces? He was their chief for a while, Naruto remarked dryly. You shouldn't know him. I don't, Unaki retorted. It doesn't mean I won't find out, eventually. He stressed the last part out, before walking the last steps of the cobblestone road that led to a pear-shaped mansion that nestled for half of it into the mountainside itself. There was a pool of natural water collected from a river nearby that branched off, the other part falling down in the city's lower half. Maybe, Naruto looked up, craning his neck to take in the mansion in its entirety. This is the Tsuchikage's mansion. It's where you'll live from now on anyway, Unaki shrugged, before gesturing him in. You can start calling it home, the old cage snickered as he stepped in after him. The floor was made of smooth marble, and the smell of sulfur came up strongly from a door further down. The bathrooms are at the end. They are natural hot springs. One of the few benefits of having a hidden village in a dormant volcano is that hot water is always available, chuckling to himself, the old Tsuchikage headed in the kitchen. This here is Junko, she's the housekeeper and one of Iwagakure's finest kunoichi. The woman that met him with a crossed look was a tall and stern-looking ninja, dressed in formal mission attire and holding her dark eyes fixed on him as if he was some sort of monster. The looks of the Konoha villagers returned to his mind, but this time he snarled them down. He had grown from being a boy scared of his own shadow and the whispers, he had grown from being afraid of the glares. He would be doing the glaring from now on. His gaze went past the woman to the plates she was setting on the table. Ah, Tsuchikage-sama, do we have a guest? Yes Junko, we do, Unaki smiled. Let me present to you Naruto Namikaze. It is a pleasure getting to know the son of the man that killed my father, Junko smiled. Well, You can't choose who you are born to, Naruto replied smiling back, but you can choose whether to pick up their mantle or not, and I refused to pick up my father's. Well, that's something we will have to see, Unaki hummed thoughtfully. Is Kuratsuka still training outside? She's in the bath right now, Junko acquiesced. Oh, very well, the Tsuchikage sat down. Please, add another plate. We'll discuss everything over a nice warm lunch. Somehow, it felt more like two sharks were about to meet one another, rather than two people about to have lunch. Sakura. So, is there anything else you can tell me about him? She asked, eyeing Sasuke's form. His body was tense, his face pained as she had him recall everything he knew about his brother, what little details the rest of her investigations hadn't turned out. No, that's all, Sasuke dryly replied, a grimace settled on his face. You won't be able to defeat him alone, you know that. I'm stronger than I was at the academy, Uchiha. It's not a matter of strength, Sasuke murmured. It's a matter of mind, he chuckled. It took me a while to understand his words. You are really going to fight someone who had no qualms in killing his entire clan? How are you going to find him to begin with? That is for me to find out, she retorted. Thank you for your time, Uchiha. Listen to me for a moment. Sasuke snarled, if you even think that going against him head-on is what will make you win, then think again. He will demolish you. He will tear apart your mind and strike you down. It doesn't matter, muttered Sakura, at least I will have fought. Go on then, grumbled Sasuke. Go on to your death. Silently, Sakura walked away from the Inuzuka's grounds and towards the main road to the center of Konoha. It wasn't the first time Sasuke had said he had told her everything, only for her to suddenly remember a different question to ask the next day. She'd keep on coming back until she knew everything, and then when all the information available was possible, she'd fight and kill him by herself. That man had dared to take away from her the most important thing her life had. She was not going to let it go. She would avenge Naruto. Cherry, a male voice, coming from a nearby rooftop, distracted her long enough for Sai to land and stand next to her. I saw your forehead's shining beacon and came. Forehead jokes are old news, Sai, Sakura retorted gruffly. If it's about that dinner, I'm not. It is a mean to socialize with other from our own generation. What little of them remains, Sai added. There will be no refusal to participate from you, Cherry. I can paint you a dress if you don't have one. Are you telling me you will go with your clothes painted on you? Painted clothing is a fashion statement, Sai remarked. It's clothes painted on a naked body. The ultimate form of Schrodinger's reality is the person dressed or not dressed. Until one touches her, she is dressed. When one touches her, she is naked. Sakura sighed. Being with Jiraiya turned you into a worse pervert than before, Sai. Jiraiya-sama taught me many things, Sai admitted. He taught me where the G-spot is. Did you know it's? I'm a girl and a medic. I know where the hell that spot is. She retorted hotly, her face heated from embarrassment. Really, Sai, she groaned. If I go, you promise you'll let me leave early. The moment the first of them leaves, Sai said with a knowing nod. I'll be the only girl, I just know it, Sakura sighed. She yawned slightly, bringing her right hand up to her mouth. Do I really have to go? I'm tired from listening to Sasuke's "you want to win ull just die" crap. Yes, it will do you good. Socializing helps people forget their worries, Sai remarked, by looking at how others live their crappy dickless lives. I don't think that's how it's supposed to be, Sai, Sakura exhaled loudly, shaking her head. I'll catch a nap and be there. Don't worry, I'll come and wake you up, Sai retorted. Maybe I'll use a bucket of water. If I wet you enough, do you grow roots? No, but if you try that I will personally castrate you. With a bright smile, she flickered out of the road and onto the nearby building's rooftop. From there, she jumped down once more in front of her house, and entered. The moment her gaze went to the fridge, she just knew the scene would be the same as always. Phew was sticking her head in the fridge. Phew. The girl replied, emerging with a dried sardine in her mouth like a cat caught with its paws on the jam. The sardine dangled from her mouth for a moment, before she quickly swallowed it whole. "You're going to spoil your dinner," Sakura hissed. "That's stupid," Fyu snickered back, "you can't spoil a dinner. It doesn't like things." Sakura slumped down on the chair in the kitchen, letting go of the pile of papers she had in her hands and closing her eyes. A cool touch soon came gently to her temples, as Fyu pressed over her forehead a cold bottle of water. "Here." She chirped happily. "Everything went well?" "No," Sakura groaned. "Oh, Fyu turned around. Sakura could just imagine her trying to come up with something to continue the conversation. "Why are baby showers done without babies?" "What?" That question was strange even for Fyu's parameters. "My team's going to hold a baby shower for one of my teammates who's pregnant. But the baby isn't born yet, so why is there a shower without the baby?" It's a way of saying they'll buy gifts a baby might need, and showering him in gifts. "Like what?" "Like, I don't know, a crib." "But isn't a baby going to die if you shower him with a crib?" "Even I know that much," she said, proud of her statement. "You don't actually shower the baby with the gifts," Sakura exhaled once more loudly. She was going to have her hair turn gray before long. "You buy a gift, and then hand it over to the expectant mother. It's as simple as that." "Oh, good." There was a heartbeat of silence. Literally, Sakura could swear her heart had given off a single beat, before Fyu asked once more. "What do you gift a baby? What does the mother have already?" "Don't know." "What would she like?" "Don't know." The way she replied made it clear she was trying to rope her into it. "When is the baby shower going to take place?" "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" "Good," Sakura opened her eyes then. "You mean you have to buy the gift today?" "Yes. And depending on how long it might take, we will be out also during the night," Sakura continued. What?" "I don't know. We'll eat dinner outside." "At Hebai's?" "Yes, at Hebai's," Sakura muttered. "Anywhere but here, where Sai can find us." "Why?" "Because he wants us to go to a horrible party," Sakura snapped back, standing up quickly. "Let's go out and buy a nice teddy bear, all right?" "Yeah. For me?" "Well, one for you and one for the baby then," Sakura added, being particularly festive at the thought of avoiding the socializing with the shinobi of her age. She was already at the door when Fyu commented offhandedly. "Good. You know it's going to be a boy?" "Yes." "Nice to know," Sakura stated while plainly uninterested about it if not for the mental note of buying if a teddy was not found a cerulean baby dress. And she's going to call him Naruto, like his father. If Sakura's neck could have spun faster, it would have. What? Naruto. It has the same name as Naruto, but it's not our Naruto. At least, I think it's, when two people have the same name it's. Ah. Sakura exhaled in relief. Yes, I understand. When two people have the same name it's said they are one another's namesake. Oh, Fyu blinked. So it's a Naruto namesake. Maybe, Sakura shrugged. It is curious though, who else would call their son after a topping in ramen? Someone who likes ramen very much. Fu hazarded. Sakura kept shaking her head all throughout the day. Even as they settled for a teddy and a couple of clothes, there really was no way to keep Fyu away from the Hebai. Therefore, she completely missed the signs of the trap springing, when she entered Hebai and found herself sitting at the same table as Sai and the rest of the same age shinobi. If looks could kill, hers would have murdered Sai in an instant. Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akimichi, Kiba and Yazuka, Ami Sato, Shino Abarame, Broken Teams, Reformed Teams, Dark Eyes, they all shared the same look. Sai and Fyu completed the table. There was an empty chair, for someone who apparently had yet to arrive. The only one that could possibly join them would Niji Hyuga, if he ever decided to leave the door of Hinata's room unguarded. Thinking about Hinata made her grimace. The timid girl of the academy replaced with a ranting lunatic, unable even to remember herself, was a harsh and bitter pill to swallow. She smiled forcefully towards Ami, who returned the smile before sweetly saying, Forward girl, you trying to get in Sasuke's pants now that Naruto's dead?" The Hebai was no longer the same after Sakura flung the first fist. Nagato. Where are you going? Konan asked him, and as always, he just stared back at her. Don't give me that look, Nagato, Konan remarked. Where are you going? Tsunagakur, Nagato said. To see if Sasori is done with his Galil puppet army. He would have sent a message if he had. Not if he's working for Orochimaru, Nagato said dryly, moving towards the outer balcony of a Megakure's cage tower. Hanzo had the tower completely closed from the outside, and even the balcony had been out of limits during his time. Paranoid as he was, he never went anywhere without being sure he was covered from snipers. If he is, he will die, Konan replied. There is nothing that can stop you, Nagato. If that was true, then why does the statue elude me yet? The red-haired man replied bitterly. I can feel someone is holding it down, but I can't understand where it is. Growling, he slammed his fist against the wall's side. If only I hadn't trusted Madara. I let him keep the location a secret. Snarling, he looked up to the sky. In any case, I'll go and see how long it will take yet. While I'm gone, keep an eye out for Megakure's citizens. I will, Konan nodded. With those words, Nagato disappeared in thin air. Konan returned inside, and sighed. Once more, Nagato assigned her to guarding one of places everyone else already guarded. It wasn't as if someone would suddenly be suicidal enough to step inside now that he had left, right? Hebai. Konoha sucked. Stand still, you brat. Karen's manners were even worse. I can't properly peel your skin if you keep on dodging. Her means of showing loves were truly horrible. One had to wonder what she would turn out when that inflated belly of her finally gave away. Maybe that's the point of me dodging. Hebai remarked dryly. Anyway, Karen snarled, settling her glasses properly and sitting back down with a huff. I'm doing as asked. How did you get inside Konoha to begin with? Saburo-san got me through. They've asked him to reinforce the defenses of Konoha, so he carefully poked holes to let spies in. That stupid man. Karen grumbled, Orochimaru-sama could have asked me to do it. In that state. Hebai deadpanned, who the hell did you eat anyway? No one, Karen retorted. I just did as Orochimaru-sama ordered. Anyway, Hebai slid backwards, attaching herself to a wall. See you later, fat cow. You bass. Hebai ignored the rest of the girl's taunts, and then slowly began to make her way quietly through the walls of the apartment complex. Naruto Uzumaki's own room was empty of everything valuable, but at the same time remained closed because of sentimentality. She snorted at the thought as she safely landed inside the empty room. The moment the sun would set, she'd proceed with her mission. Pulling Tsunagakur into the war wouldn't be a problem. Especially if, the enemy, as Orochimaru-sama said, would pull the country itself into a bad position. Really, it was so eerie how Orochimaru-sama knew just about everything that was supposed to happen. Then again, he wasn't a legendary Sunin for nothing. Still, there had to be a limit to his prescience. There had to. Check the description for the links to the author.